The Senate Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Mr. Secretary, please call roll.
Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Senator Daly.
Here.
Senator Krasner. Chair Flores.
Present. Thank you. Please let the record reflect all members are present and we have a quorum. Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to the hardworking Committee on Government Affairs. I appreciate the enthusiasm around the bills. I know that we have an overflow room, particularly for those of you looking for seats. Just so you know, you can go to room 2135. That is the overflow room for our committee. I want to give everybody a quick lay of the land for today. We have 4 bill presentations. Senate Bill 94, Senate Bill 226, Senate Bill 262, and Senate Bill 271. We are not going to take them in that order. We'll start off with Senate Bill 226, followed by Senate Bill 94, followed by Senate Bill 271, and then lastly Senate Bill 262. That's the order we'll take the bills in. Just some ground rules for everybody. Number one, I want to remind everybody, please silence your cell phones. I'm doing that myself now. I also want to remind folk that we're going to limit testimony to 2 minutes, whether it be in support, opposition, or neutral. I will cut you off right at the 2-minute mark. Please don't take that as a sign of disrespect. However, in the interest of transparency and fairness, we're going to set the cap at 2 minutes for everyone. For those of you, particularly those of you who are subject matter experts and have a lot to contribute and cannot meet everything you want on the record within 2 minutes, please provide your testimony in writing, whether it be via email or printed out to our committee staff, and they will ensure that it is shared with the entire committee so that we can review it. With that, I also know that our majority leader is about to join us. Yes. And so we are going to just give her a couple extra minutes here just for her to make her way into the room. I also just want to remind folk that we are in crunch time. What I mean by that is every single day we're going to be having very long meetings. That is not intentional. Unfortunately, that's the only way that we're going to get across the finish line. We also have members who are all simultaneously presenting bills. So there may be moments throughout the day today where there's only 2 of us here, 3 of us, all of us, and please don't take that as a sign of disrespect. It's just that we're all simultaneously presenting bills in other committees. With that, we're going to go into a quick 1-minute recess. Please don't leave, just to allow for our majority leader to join us. We are in recess. The Senate Committee on Government Affairs will come back to order. Welcome, Majority Leader. At this time, I'd like to open up the hearing on Senate Bill 226, which revises provisions governing public works. Good afternoon, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chair Flores and members of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. For the record, my name is Nicole Cannizzaro. I represent Senate District 6 in the northwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley. And I am here today proud to present Senate Bill 226, which revises provisions related to public works. By way of some background information, as you all, I'm sure on this committee are very aware, Nevada's prevailing wage laws ensure that when government dollars for publicly funded construction projects are offered, that they do not undercut local wage and benefit standards, that they don't prevent, and they are designed to prevent a race to the bottom among contractors. They are designed to support good paying jobs and to provide value to taxpayers. The bill that I am proposing today, Senate Bill 226, clarifies the use of prevailing wages to apply to all types of publicly funded projects and ensures competitive compensation rates among all industries and occupations to the benefit of workers and taxpayers alike. Senate Bill 226 will benefit our state in several ways and provide assurances regarding the construction of public buildings. By requiring the payment of prevailing wages on publicly funded projects, we not only support our local labor force by paying fair wages, but we will also attract and build a pipeline of highly qualified workers. Before I introduce my co-presenters, I did want to note for the committee that this bill is written in a way that I think is quite broad. And was designed to do so because I do want to have a conversation about when we are seeing any type of taxpayer-funded dollars go to projects. How are we supporting the workers that are building those projects so that we are getting value as taxpayers? The other thing that I would like to note for the committee is that we have, and I'm sure that you will hear from many folks today, we have had a stakeholder meeting and other smaller stakeholder meetings with individuals who are interested in this bill. We are in the process of taking in amendments that have been offered to us to evaluate those and to try to find a good balance in this bill to get at the projects that we know currently are not subject to or have been designed in order to avoid current prevailing wage laws and public works, and to ensure that when we do say we are putting taxpayer dollars into projects, that we are also supporting the community that's helping to build them. So I did want the committee to be aware that we are having ongoing conversations. Myself and my co-presenters, Mr. Vince Saavedra and Rob Benner, along with many other interested parties, are working very hard to try to negotiate through some of this. And I know that through this bill hearing, we're going to be talking about the bill as written. I'm sure you will hear some concerns, but just wanted to let the committee know that we remain committed to working on this bill with all the stakeholders, and that we are still in the process of negotiations. I would like at this point, Mr. Chair, if it pleases you and the committee, to walk through sections of the bill. So Section 2 makes a declaration of legislative intent, finding that, among other things, the payment of prevailing wages to workers on public works projects that are funded in whole or in part by public money is essential to the economic well-being of the state, increasing the number of skilled construction workers in this state, enhancing the workforce of this state, and increasing redevelopment opportunities within our state. To the extent practicable, the interpretation of the provisions of the Nevada Revised Statutes and the Nevada Administrative Code must align with the provisions of the Federal Davis-Bacon Act to ensure uniformity and consistency on federal and state public works projects in Nevada, and that any interpretation of the Davis-Bacon Act applies to the interpretation of Chapter 338 of NRS unless the interpretation of the Act directly conflicts with a clear and specific requirement set forth in statute. To expand and ensure that prevailing wage is paid on certain projects, such as lease buybacks and similar situations, Section 3 of the bill provides that any project that is financed in whole or in part from public money is subject to prevailing wage if, without limitation, a public body pays money or provides other compensation directly to or on behalf of the developer or contractor of the project or any subcontractor who performs any work on the project. A public body pays, credits, reduces, forgives, or waives any fee, cost, rent, insurance premium, bond premium, obligation, or expense, including without limitation an incidental expense in relation to the project that is normally required in the execution of a contract for a public work. A public body loans money in relation to the project that is required to be repaid to the public body on a contingent basis. Any employee of a public body performs skilled work or labor in furtherance of the project. In relation to the project, a public body sells, leases, or otherwise transfers for less than fair market value any developed or undeveloped real property or any other property or asset. Or, in relation to the project, a public body transfers property of the state or political subdivision for less than fair market value. Section 4 provides that certain procedures relating to awarding contracts for public works do not apply to certain projects, including properties leased by public bodies, certain construction in an improvement district or redevelopment district, certain qualified projects as determined by the Office of Economic Development within the Office of the Governor, any property or construction that has been or will be conveyed to a public body pursuant to the terms of a development agreement, or property where a public body retains the right to retake ownership or premises after commencement of work on the project. Further, to clarify, these provisions, subsections 1 through 4, and subsection 1 of section 4, do not abrogate the payment of prevailing wage on any of the projects. Section 5 amends the definition of public work to include the construction, demolition, alteration, custom fabrication, or repair work on any property or premises, regardless of whether financed in whole or in part from public money, if at the time of the contract the project is entered into, the property or premise is owned by a public body, the property or premise in whole or in part is leased by a public body or is subject to an agreement to be subsequently leased to a public body. The property or any horizontal construction or vertical construction is in an improvement district or a redevelopment project. The project qualifies for certain tax credits. The property or any horizontal construction or vertical construction has been or will be conveyed in whole or in part to a public body pursuant to the terms of a development agreement with the public body, or a public body retains any right, including, without limitation, a contingent right to retake ownership of the property or premises after the commencement of work on the project. Section 5 also revises the definition of the terms horizontal construction and vertical construction. Section 8 of this bill provides that any regulation adopted by the Labor Commissioner relating to public works must be consistent with the Declaration of Legislative Intent spelled out in Section 2. And finally, Sections 5, 13, and 14 of the bill expand the definition of workers who are subject to prevailing wage on a public work to include custom fabricators. With that, Mr. Chair, I do want to turn the presentation over to co-presenters. Vince Saavedra with the Southern Nevada Building Trades. We also have joining us Dr. Jeff Waddups from the Department of Economics at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, to explain some of the economic principles surrounding Senate Bill 226. And with that, I will, if it pleases the chair, I apologize. We're going to go to Mr. Benner first, if that's okay.
Please.
Treasurer of the Northern Nevada Building and Construction Trades Council. I'd like to talk about a couple issues that this bill will address. In general, public entities are required to follow prevailing wage laws, which are intended to ensure that workers on public construction projects are paid a fair wage with benefits for their work. However, there is a loophole where a public entity may sell a property for a planned project to a developer for a reduced or nominal cost and then lease the property back from the developer into perpetuity. Because the project is technically being constructed with the money from the public entity, the private developer is not required to pay prevailing wage for the construction of that project. This may lead to litigation, which is an added cost burden for taxpayers. There have been instances in recent years of government entities gifting land to private entities for the purpose of allowing development on those properties and avoiding the requirements of NRS 338, including the payment of prevailing wage. A couple examples of this occurring in recent years come from the city of North Las Vegas and the city of Mesquite. I'll speak about the instance in Mesquite, and my colleague, Mr. Saavedra, will speak about the instance in North Las Vegas. In 2020, the city of Mesquite asked the Attorney General's office for an opinion on whether it could transfer land to a private developer to redevelop a piece of land owned by the city and avoid paying prevailing wage on that project. The Attorney General's office stated such a decision would be improper and the city was incorrectly trying to avoid the payment of prevailing wage by transferring the land for nothing to the developer. It was the AG's opinion that prevailing wage should be paid for the development of the project. Another example that's up here in the north in Reno, the former site of Park Lane Mall was reconstructed as what is now known the Reno Experience District. It had a $3.5 million sewer fees waived and is now an enormous luxury apartment complex. It was built without prevailing wage by an out-of-state general contractor. Rent at these units is over $2,000 a month for less than 700 square feet of space, far from being affordable. These apartments would likely be built with or without prevailing wages. If public money is used, the benefit should return to the community in the form of good wages being paid to local workers. Issues like these are addressed by Section 3 and 5 of this bill, which include language clarifying that even if a public agency transfer property to a private developer at less than fair market value, the workers on that project must be paid prevailing wage under NRS 338. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Vince Saavedra.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Vince Saavedra. Vince, V-I-N-C-E, Saavedra, S-A-A-V-E-D-R-A, and I want to say happy Latino Lobby Day to everyone. Appreciate the hard work everyone's putting in this building. My name is Vince Saavedra. I'm the Executive Secretary Treasurer of the Southern Nevada Building Trades Unions. The affiliates of SMBTU represent roughly 30,000 highly skilled construction workers across Clark, Lincoln, and Nye counties. Nevada's prevailing wage laws were enacted decades ago to ensure that taxpayers' funds are used to benefit the whole community by requiring the payment of the wage that prevails in the community in which the construction work is to be performed. Every year, the Labor Commissioner's Office engages in a thorough survey process to determine the wage rate that prevails for the specific types of construction work in the region where the work is being performed. This process takes the information produced by the contractors, both union and non-union, and labor representatives. For this process, a prevailing wage rate is set for the type of work on government-funded projects above $100,000. There have been incidences in recent years of the government entities gifting land to private entities for the purposes of allowing development on these properties and avoiding the requirements of Chapter 338 of Nevada's revised statute, including the payment of prevailing wage. An example of this occurred recent years to come from the city of North Las Vegas. The city of North Las Vegas gave land on Cary Road to a private entity to develop a police training center to be used by the Metropolitan Police Department and other adjoining police agencies. Despite the land being of significant value, the city gave it to a property entity and prevailing wage did not apply to the project. Thus, there was a significant public value given at the cost of the taxpayers because it was government land that belonged to the people of the city, but prevailing wage did not apply. If the city had used $100,000 on the project, prevailing wage would apply, but given land of greater value did not make prevailing wage apply under the current law. The intention of this bill is prevention of examples like the one mentioned from occurring in the future. We want prevailing wage chapter to examine the amount of public or taxpayers' value being used or given in construction development versus merely whether non-public money is being given in the amount of greater than $100,000. I also want to be clear that we don't intend to change the $100,000 threshold which prevailing wage laws apply. That's not the intent of this bill, and we have heard from some in opposition to the bill that it's a concern. We hear their concerns and we're willing to clarify this language. Another major provision within the bill is the interpretation of the state's prevailing wage law with those of the Federal Davis-Bacon Act, which is federal prevailing wage. The federal law has decades of interpretive the federal law has decades of interpretive precinct under it that shows it to be beneficial to workers' community. Our state has little interpretive precinct available concerning our own prevailing wage laws. This is, in fact, true for many laws within our state. Adding the first section concerning legislative intent to interpret Nevada laws consistent with David Bacon precedent is important because it will guide workers, agencies, contractors in administering the work on public works projects. Off-site fabrication is also a part of this bill, but I do want to note that this is an issue being addressed in other legislation this session. It's not the intent of our bill to expand on that pending legislation or to interfere with it. With that, I'd like to turn to Dr. Waddups, who has thoroughly studied prevailing wage laws in Nevada and has important economic information concerning the effects of Nevada's prevailing wage laws.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate, and senators, it's a pleasure to be here I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Jeff Waddups. I'm a professor in the economics department at UNLV. I'm a labor economist, but I have to make it clear that I'm not speaking for UNLV right now. So what I say can't be held against UNLV. So first of all, I've had the opportunity and the luck in my career to work with a lot of really smart people, and one of the research teams I've been able to work with has done quite a bit of work on prevailing wage, on the economics of prevailing wage laws. Now, prevailing wage laws establish job-specific and location-specific minimum wages for construction workers on public works projects. So contractors and subcontractors on these projects must pay their workers prevailing wages and fringe benefits, or in other words, they must pay wages and fringe benefits that prevail in the local region. The idea here, of course, is to prevent outside contractors from other locations, other states, and so on, from bidding on local public works projects using lower paid workers that might not have the skills to do the work, the effect of which would be to undermine local standards of skill and pay, and we've heard the other speakers talk about this. The aim of prevailing wage laws is to support the development of a highly skilled, highly productive, and thus highly paid local construction labor force. Now, of course, policymakers' primary interest, or not primary, but at least an important interest, is whether prevailing wage laws increase construction costs. So, a naive way of thinking about the impact of prevailing wage laws on total construction costs is just do a simple calculation. So say a prevailing wage law were to raise wages by 25%. Now suppose labor costs were 20% of total costs. Then 25% times 20% would be equal to 5%, and prevailing wage laws would be expected to increase total construction costs by 5%. Now, although this is kind of an easy way to understand it, I hope it was anyway, there's a lot of numbers, but this method of assessing the impact of prevailing wage laws is inadequate and doesn't address how employers react to confronting the higher prevailing wages. A more careful and scientifically sound, well-reasoned analysis would try to observe construction projects in the prevailing wage projects and non-prevailing wage projects. And thus, and this method, so when you compare prevailing wage projects with non-prevailing wage projects, you've done an apples to apples comparison. And the research generally shows that when you do this when you compare similar groups where the only difference is the prevailing wage being paid, there is no statistically significant increase in construction costs associated with prevailing wage policies. So you've got this thing where you can pay more workers, but it doesn't increase total construction costs, so no one believes it. So anyway, but why? How can this possibly be the case? So why doesn't paying prevailing wages lead to higher construction costs? Well, first of all, higher wages likely cause construction managers to substitute higher skilled workers for lower skilled workers. Higher skill implies higher productivity, which means that workers can get paid more without raising costs. Also, the evidence suggests that higher wages lead managers to substitute higher technology production methods for labor. When machines and technology make workers more productive, workers can get paid more without raising costs. Okay, so these are some of the ways. Also, higher wages probably lead to more effective management practices, less waste. That also could lead to similar costs between the two groups, even though there are higher wages. Okay. So those are kind of theories. It's like kind of theoretical. Does the data bear this out? And what does the data say? Here are some examples of studies using data from school construction projects. Now, focusing on one kind of project like schools, for example, helps us to do that kind of apples-to-apples comparison. Now, Azari, Rod, Phillips, and Pruce, they're part of the team that I've worked with. In 2003, they studied school construction in the U.S. They compared states that had prevailing wage laws with those that did not. And they found no statistically significant difference in total costs of school projects. Duncan, Phillips, and Pruce, they studied school production in British Columbia. Schools began to be covered by the equivalent of a prevailing wage policy up there. And when construction costs were measured before and after the policy, they found no difference in construction costs. Okay, actually, one of my colleagues and I, we looked at school construction in Nevada, school construction projects in Nevada. We tested whether the 90% prevailing wage rule reduced total construction costs by looking at construction projects when the rule was in effect and when it wasn't. The evidence was that there was no statistically significant difference. So there are other studies out there as well. Okay. So much of the work that has been done by my colleagues and I on this has been published in peer-reviewed journals, the gold standard for high-quality, credible, and reliable academic research. They're not just some kind of, research done for think tanks with an agenda. So these are publications in peer-reviewed journals. So anyway, I can say with a high degree of confidence that establishing or strengthening prevailing wage policies will not likely have a material effect on construction costs in public building projects. Okay, prevailing wage laws also help the construction industry to produce and maintain higher levels of skill through supportive apprenticeship programs. Left to the unregulated market, skills training is very difficult in construction. Prevailing wage laws help by providing incentives to employers. Let's see, prevailing wage laws allow for employing apprentices at rates below the prevailing wage, thus incentivizing contractors to support training for more apprentices. So that's good for apprenticeship programs. For workers, the extra measure of stability afforded by prevailing wage law likely makes it easier for young workers to decide to pursue high-skilled occupations in construction, and that it's worth the effort to do so. As far as the empirical research goes, a researcher found that in states where prevailing wage laws exist, apprenticeship enrollment is higher by between 6 and 8%. So the data seem to support it. And finally, workplace safety. Construction is one of the most dangerous industries as measured by injuries and fatalities. One of my colleagues found that non-fatal injuries are 7 to 10% lower in prevailing wage states. Another of my colleagues found that construction workers in non-prevailing wage states are 12% more likely to report disabilities during the time between 2009 and 2011. Now, admittedly, they could not definitively say if it was the prevailing wage law that reduced the injuries and fatalities. It was more of a correlation rather than causation. But nevertheless, the correlation is there, and more research would have to be done.
Professor,
Yes.
and I hate to interrupt.
Sorry.
No, and I don't mean to be rude. You're obviously sharing very important information.
Yeah.
And you're obviously a subject matter expert. So I don't mean to minimize that. However, in the interest of time,
All right.
I would like to do this. I'd like to open it for questions. And as the questions come along, your data and your obviously in-depth knowledge will serve as, let me explain why this isn't the way you're interpreting it. This is actually correct. Let me give you some examples, if that's okay with you, Professor. And again, I don't mean to minimize. I know you prepared for today.
I was I had 2 sentences left.
Okay.
So I was done.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Professor. So with that, members, I'd like to open up for questions. Please, Senator Goycochea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to get right to the point. I'm really concerned about some of our nonprofits, 501s, say Boys and Girls Clubs, because the way this bill is drafted, even if a community, a rural county, really wanted to make a piece of property or a building available to them at a reduced amount so that you could provide a service, whether it be, housing, broad gamut, you name the project, and I'll just, and I guess the concern would be, at that point, then they would become prevailing wage jobs. And I'm afraid in some areas, and I don't want to argue with the professor, but it might be enough to slant and stop the project. And so I'm concerned about that. Again, the local government is making it available because they recognize it's clearly going to have to come in at a reduced value in order to let the project happen.
Nicole Canizaro, Senate District 6, through you, Mr. Chair, to Senator Goycochea. We've heard some of those same concerns. So let me start by saying that we recognize that this bill wouldn't capture some of those certain projects. We want to make sure that what we're not doing is creating a disincentive for things like Boys and Girls Club, for other nonprofit activities, knowing how important they are and how much they do provide value to our communities. I think that is definitely a conversation that's still in the works. So when I talk about being open to having some amendments and how we can finesse that, that's something that is absolutely part of that conversation. So I wanted to just preface any answers with that particular piece. And then also note that we are trying to strike the right balance between if you are trying to create a situation where maybe you go around prevailing wage laws to provide something that might not technically fall within something that we think of as like a Boys and Girls Club, that they are captured, because that is what prevailing wage laws were designed to accomplish, while at the same time knowing that there may need to be some better workings of some of the definitions so that we're not disincentivizing some of those other very critical services. And then I think the only other thing I would add, if either Dr. Wattups or Mr. Saavedra would like to add on to that as well, is that I do think it is important to note that some of these issues, as they come about, might not necessarily affect those particular projects because of some of the research that has been cited by Dr. Wattups, where we're not seeing those significant differences in costs between prevailing wage and other projects. Certainly, I think there are exceptions to that, and we're trying to figure out what that balance is in this bill.
If I may, just a quick, yeah. And I think, there is a difference, especially in some of the rural areas. I remember it might have been the 15 session when we had prevailing wage kind of scaled back. We bid a school in Wendover, and then it didn't get built, and then we came back to subsequent session, and it was built in prevailing wage. There was almost a 30% increase in that. And again, it's a rural, you had to transport people, mob, demob, and a lot more values, I understand, in that. But so there are instances, I would say, it could be impacted more than it would be, say, in an urban area. But I appreciate your ability to work on it, and I hope we can get some of the projects. I don't mind saying I had some rural jurisdictions saying, oh, this will kill our projects, our housing in Jackpot or our Boys and Girls Club. So, again, I appreciate your assistance on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, ma'am.
Vince Saavedra, for the record, through the chair and to the members of the committee. As Ms. Canizaro said, or Senator Canizaro said, so there's that piece, right, that we're working on amendments to, as well as like if somebody were to get like $150 application fee waived, we're not going after that type of, plumbing or some type of fee or an abatement for a single family residential home or something. That's not the intent, and we're working on amendments in this bill as we go forward. And I know nobody asked that question, but before it comes up, just letting you all know.
And thank you. Senator Daley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator. Majority Leader, excuse me. And I spoke with you. I spoke with, I'm going to say it wrong. I'll just call you Vince. And no resistance from me on application of prevailing wage and the various things. But I do think, and I addressed some concerns with the way the bill is drafted and various things. We need to hit our target. We need to take all things into consideration. I know there were some things you mentioned primarily about land at less than fair market value, but there's other things on the lease back and public-private partnerships and where that money comes from. And, I would argue, and I don't want to, we've had this discussion where you say, oh, you can save all this money and various things, and I just heard the number 30% higher. And that is just not true. We did a study in 2015, I think might have been 2013, and the labor component of just about any job, a little bit different on highway, but on a typical building job, the labor component is only 25% of the cost of the contract. There's no way you can save 30% unless the workers pay you. So I'm tired of hearing that same old, oh, we'll save 30%. Maybe you can save 5, but it's a false economy. It's like not changing the oil in your car. It says you pay more in the safety. And then when you get to nonprofits and various things, you have Nevada Museum of Art right now constructing a $42 million project, paying prevailing wage. They don't have to. They have a union contractor, but they're using prevailing wage on that job. So a lot of these things, not to take any thunder away from the professor, but it's just not true that you can save anywhere near 30% unless the workers pay you. So, and I look forward to working with you to try to get this and hit the right target. I have a bill on the same subject, and we're going to make progress is the goal.
Members, any additional remarks or questions? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation. If I can invite you to sit back, and at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 226. I want to remind folk, there is a lot of people signed in enthusiastic support and/or opposition, but I want to remind folk that if somebody's already addressed your remark, your issue, feel free to say, I agree with the previous speaker, put your name on the record so that we can get as many people on the record as possible. Whoever wishes to go first, please.
Paul Catha with the Culinary Workers Union Local 226. Last name is spelled C-A-T-H-A. I'll be brief. We're jealous of the bill number, but we do support SB 226. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Fran Almaraz, representing Teamsters Local 631. Construction workers are in this union. We are in full support of this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Danny Thompson, representing Operating Engineers Local 3 and Local 12. We are in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dave Stouffer. I'm representative of Southwest Mountain States Regional Council of Carpenters and Reno Local 971 and Las Vegas 1977 support this bill.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Please.
Morgan Biaselli with Silver State Government Relations, here representing IBEW 1245, and we support this bill. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores, members of the committee. For the record, Carlos Hernandez, representing the Nevada State AFL-CIO. On behalf of over 150,000 members and 120 unions, the Nevada State AFL-CIO proudly supports Senate Bill 226. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please.
My name is Andrew Maldonado. I'm president and training director for Local 350 Plumbers and Pipe Fitters. I support local Bill 226.
Thank you. And please, those of you wishing to testify, feel free to occupy all the seats. Welcome.
Greg Esposito, representing the Nevada State Pipe Trades, and we are in full support of SB 226. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
My name is Kalani Kanakoa. I am the business agent of UA Local 350 in Northern Nevada, and we are in full support of Bill 226. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
My name is Denver Hughes. First name Denver, D-E-N-V-E-R. Last name Hughes, H-U-G-H-E-S. I am a journeyman for the UA Local 350 Plumbers Pipe Fitters, and I stand in full support of SB 226. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
My name is Steve Schmaltz. Steve, S-T-E-V-E-S-C-H-M-A-L-T-Z. I'm a member of Local 350 Apprentice, and I stand in support of this bill.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
My name is Michael Guanasso. I am a journeyman at Local 350, and I do stand in support of Bill 226. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
My name is Eric Dillard. I'm a member of Local 350, and I support the bill.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Hello, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Aaron Ibarra with Southern Nevada Building Trades, and I urge support on SB 226. Thank you.
And thank you. Is there anybody else in Carson City wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 226? We will go to Las Vegas, please.
Thank you very much. Stephen Dudley with Carpenters Local 1977. Stephen, Steven Dudley. We represent just under 6,000 carpenters here in Southern Nevada, and we have 140 plus carpenters in the room, and we all support SB 226. Thank you.
And thank you. And for those of you who are in support of Senate Bill 226, you made the journey all the way to the Grand Sawyer. So if you could rise if you support the bill, just so that everybody in the room can see you. and again, it's just, this is your building, so it's important that we acknowledge your presence, and thank you. We'll continue with those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 226. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. James Halsey, representing IBEW Local 357. We are in support of Senate Bill 226. Thank you.
And thank you. Next speaker, please.
Chairman Flores, committee members, my name is Alfonso Lopez. I represent the sheet metal and aerial transportation workers, and we also are in full support of 226. Thank you.
And thank you.
My name is Daniel Haigwood, Business Manager, Local 135. We are in support of SB 226. Thank you.
And thank you. Next speaker, please.
Robert Diaz, Smart Local 88. We are in support of Bill 226.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Bob Horton with the Iron Workers here in Las Vegas, Local 433. We fully support this bill.
And thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. My name is Jimmy Schwartz with Ironworkers Local 433 out of Las Vegas. We support the bill. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Anybody else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 226? Seeing none, BPS, do we have anybody on the phone wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 226?
If you would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 226, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller 823, please press star 6 to unmute.
This is Mike Grimley with the Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 16, and we are full support.
And thank you for calling in. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 226.
Caller 386, please press star 6 to unmute. Caller 386, please press star 6 to unmute.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. My name is Charles Zemp. I represent the International Union Bricklayers Allied Crafts Workers, Local 13, Nevada, and I'm here to show my support to Senate Bill 226.
Thank you. Just for the sake of clarity, can I have you spell your last name, please? I think we may have lost him. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 226, please.
Caller 732, please press star 6 to unmute. Caller 732, please press star 6 to unmute.
Juan Pineda with Local 416 Iron Workers, and we're in full support of the bill SB 226.
Sir, could I have you spell your name for the record, please?
First name is Juan, Juan. Last name is Orpineda, Orpineda.
Thank you. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 226, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Liz Sorensen. That's L-I-Z, last name S-O-R-E-N-S-O-N. I'm the president of the Nevada State AFL-CIO, and I'm here today in full support of SB 226, and I urge this committee to support the bill as well. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 226.
Caller 772, we can see you're unmuted. Please continue.
Oh, good afternoon, Chairman Flores. My name is Larry Wilson, and I'm with the United Auto Workers, and we're in full support of 226, and we urge the committee to support the bill. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 226.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. My name is Russ James with the Nevada AFL-CIO, and we are in full support of SB 226.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 226.
Public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 226. BPS, we'll start off with the phone. Do we have anybody over the phone wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 226?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SB 226, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
All right. Seeing no callers, we'll come to Carson City. Please, whoever wishes to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Warren Hardy, representing the Urban Consortium, which is made up of the cities of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Reno, Sparks, and Henderson, and also the associated builders and contractors. I'm here in opposition to the bill today because of the broadness of the bill that the majority leader spoke of. And I do want to thank her and the proponents of the bill for the time they've spent, for the intentioned conversations we had, and I do believe we're going to be able to get to this problem. I'm going to just do a quick trip down memory lane with Senator Daley, if I may, Mr. Chair. So in 2005, I chaired a committee called the Advisory Group to conduct interim study on lease purchase and installment purchase agreements by public entities. I chaired it. The vice chair was the best of us, Assemblywoman Debbie Smith, who became Senator Debbie Smith, the best Nevada has to offer. And we had an esteemed member of that that committee representing labor by the name of Richard Skip Daley. And one of the things we concluded in that is that the use of lease purchase agreements, installment purchase agreements by public entities should not be used to circumvent or get around the provisions of Chapter 338. If what we're talking about and the issues that have been demonstrated today are issues that need to be addressed. These things should not be used to circumvent the law. And I stand ready and willing and anxious to work on this with the sponsor and the proponents. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for joining us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Stephen Wood, for the record, representing both the Nevada League of Cities and Carson City today. We would like to echo the concerns that were brought up by Mr. Hardy and the Urban Consortium, but thank the sponsor as well for working with interested parties. And we look forward to the continued work on this bill and are happy to participate in that.
And thank you for joining us, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores and committee members. Chase Whittemore for the record, representing Nevada Builders Alliance. We are in opposition as the bill is written. I had just graduated high school in 2005, so I don't quite have the history that Mr. Hardy does with this issue. But I will give you a story. I have a friend in Reno, and not a developer, owns a single-family residence. And just last year, he decided to put a triplex on the back half, and he got a $1,500 fee waived, a sewer connection fee waived by the city of Reno. And under the way this bill is written currently, that would then become a public work project on just on a regular single-family residence. And so I appreciate the comments of the majority leader that wants to work with us and trying to find some common ground, and really appreciate her efforts and the efforts of the proponents to work with all of us on trying to solve some of those concerns that we have. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Russell Rowe here on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies Nevada chapter. That's your professional engineers in the state. We do appreciate the time that the bill sponsor has spent on this, and in particular, I appreciate Vince Saavedra's openness to speaking with us on the language of the bill. I had prepared remarks, but given it does sound like there's going to be some amendments coming, I'll just briefly summarize, if I may, which one is the language around federal Davis-Bacon. The way I read it in conversations with bill proponents, it seems to turn Davis-Bacon on its head and would apply state prevailing wage on purely federal projects. I'm happy to have more conversations about that with the proponents. And then secondly, I think was already indicated, it's a drastic expansion of state prevailing wage to the point where we would apply to 100% privately funded projects merely because it touches a piece of public property, for example. And we have concerns in those regards and how the applicability of that in those contexts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We do have a question for you. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know you were saying that we're potentially going to apply this to 100% privately funded projects. So do you have any question, concern regarding that? And I understand something may be privately funded, and I'll use the foundations that the university has and various things, and they claim all the time, private money, these were donations, this and that, and they're building on public property for a public use, a public project, except for the funding. So you're saying those should not be covered when they're meeting the public use? It's going to be deeded back over to the public agency. You know, they've done remodels on the UNR Stadium, and they built the Cashel Clubhouse, and several others. They did a whole wing right here in Carson City, Western Nevada Community College, with foundation money. And said, nope, not a public work. And I'm just curious if you think that's a problem or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Russell Rowe for the record to Senator Daley. First, to be clear, I'm not here in my capacity as representing any institution. I do represent UNLV, but I'm not here in that capacity. I am aware of the problems you've mentioned. I think some of those actually reflect the comments of Mr. Hardy in trying to capture some of those more artfully. And there, as you know, there is a separate statute with respect to higher education projects and prevailing wage and public versus private monies. But I was really more referring to private projects that, have an easement going through a public property And in my reading of the bill, that entire project would now become subject to prevailing wage.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, and I think the majority leader indicated that there were some concerns over that as well. I was just saying that there are instances where there's no public money, but they still are public projects. And it's a game, it's a dance everybody's doing here, and we need to try to nail that down. And you brought it up when you said 100% privately funded would be subject to prevailing wage, and there are circumstances when that's appropriate. So that's all I was trying to make.
And thank you. Please.
Thank you, Chair Flores, Vice Chair Orenshaw, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jennifer Berthiaume. That's Berthiaume, Government Affairs Manager at the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO. NACO is opposed to SB 226 as drafted based on some concerns from our members. I won't reiterate what has already been mentioned, but our members have similar concerns. We would like to thank the majority leader for the clarification on unintended impacts to rural community projects, and we look forward to continued discussions on this bill. Thank you.
And thank you. Please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores and committee members. For the record, Lindsay Knox with McDonald Carano, here representing the Nevada Home Builders Association, the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, and the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. I first want to thank Majority Leader and the unions to work with us and continue those conversations after this hearing. Currently, we are concerned with the broad language drafted in 226 that landscaping, amenitized open space, community improvements within confined areas of new development, and a number of other small instances that would not exist if development wasn't happening. This could discourage developers from offering amenities over and above minimum requirements, and in that case of existing development agreements, to interfere with a contract between the developer and a local government that was entered in with an economic analysis by both parties as part of a negotiation. Two things that we are looking at is that the bill only impacts development agreements negotiated after the effective date of the bill, and that the scope of Section 5, subsection 19 be reduced to projects that have a component of public or improvement district funding consistent with long-held state policy. We look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Alexis Motorex with the Nevada Chapter Associated General Contractors, representing commercial construction in Northern Nevada. The Nevada chapter has always supported prevailing wage and have fought efforts to repeal it, but for many of the reasons already stated, we are opposed to SB 226 as written and look forward to continuing to work with stakeholders on refining the language. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Good afternoon, Chair Flores and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Hess, and I am the Executive Director for the Nevada Housing Coalition. The coalition works to advance affordable housing for all Nevadans. SB 226 would be crippling for the affordable housing development sector. Of course, this bill is about good-paying jobs, and the coalition, along with our affordable housing developers, do support and already provide good-paying jobs. But state prevailing wage will add significant costs, delays, and limit the pool of workers for the construction of housing that is already challenging to build. While SB 226 sounds like just another barrier to our affordable housing progress, it would actually be devastating to our Nevadans who are living in unstable homes right at this moment. Based on research just released by the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, nearly one-third of our total renter households, or 138,766 Nevada renter households, pay more than half of their income on their rent. What would this legislation mean for these Nevadans that are waiting for more affordable housing options? The Nevada Housing Coalition recently performed a wage analysis of an actual affordable housing project that began construction in 2022. If this project was required to utilize state prevailing wage at that time, it would have increased construction costs by 29.7% and total development costs by 23.1%. This would have resulted in nearly 20% fewer units of rent-restricted housing. When we put this number into homes and families, a 210-unit project would become a 170-unit project, which means that 40 families, seniors, veterans, and workers will not have access to an affordable home. And to annualize this number based on our typical production of new affordable homes, this would deny 150 to 230 families, seniors, veterans, and workers affordable housing per year. And speaking of wages, the renter households most in need of affordable housing earn less than 50% of area median income, or $28,650, which translates to $13.70 per hour. This is a simplified analysis based on a single-person household working full-time in Clark County, but I hope it is illustrative of the very different conversations we have regarding wages and income in the affordable housing space. Thank you, Majority Leader Canizaro and our labor leaders who are working tirelessly to increase interest in the trades and acknowledge highly skilled labor. The Nevada Housing Coalition opposes 226 as introduced. We did provide an amendment.
And we just hit the 2-minute mark, however.
Thank you.
We do have a question for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have, if you can share that information and the analysis and all that stuff, you stop by my office, be happy to go through it with you so we can we take a look at that. But you did mention, you said that there's already a worker shortage and various things. Do you have the same information on what you actually pay on average, or what the workers are paid on your projects? And then, whatever that number is, do you think you'd have more success attracting workers to come to those jobs if you paid a little more? I'm just asking. It's a rhetorical question if you want, because everybody knows the answer to the question.
Chair Flores, Senator Daley, thank you so much for the question, and I would be happy to stop by your office with that wage analysis. And the wage analysis was a comparison, actually comparing federal prevailing wage, which has a residential rate, and our state prevailing wage, which is a public works rate. And in today's market, generally speaking, affordable housing is not required by most of its funding sources to pay federal prevailing wage, but the market rates are actually a little higher than federal prevailing wage right now. So that's what that analysis is based on.
And if you could come by and let me see that. And I understand the residential versus commercial, and then are you talking about, because the federal government defines residential as 3 stories or less, so if some of your projects are more than 3 stories, then we're not talking about residential construction anymore, whether you label it low income or not. So like to see your information.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Flores and members of the committee. Thank you for your time. I'm Bill Brewer, representing Nevada Rural Housing Authority. Our concern with the bill, of course, is as it relates to affordable housing. As the Nevada Housing Coalition has eloquently stated, SB 226 is currently written, would be troubling for the affordable housing sector in Nevada. Ms. Hess mentioned the coalition's research indicating the development cost of an actual project that began construction in 2022 would have increased by 23%. To put that in some context, I'll use a project that we're building right now in Mesquite, Nevada. The city's been very involved in the project, in fact, donated some land and other services to the development of the project. This would have triggered the state prevailing wage under this bill as it's currently written. And thanks to the city's help, total development costs to bring this project into existence is about $37 million. We're building 96 units. We're using tax credits, home funds, affordable housing program funds from the Federal Home Loan Bank. And so to make the project work, we also have to have a loan on it of $6.1 million. If total development costs increased by 23% on this project, we wouldn't be able to make that difference up with grants. We'd have to use loan funds to make up that difference, which would take the total cost to about $45 million. There are 2 major factors that comprise rents in an affordable project. One is debt, and the other is operating cost. If the debt went up to that 45 million mark, or about 14 million, we'd have to raise rents to about raise them about 32%. By doing that, we would not be in compliance then with the funding sources that we already have in the project, the tax credits, the home funds and so forth, because the rents would be too high. This debt load would render us unable to meet the rent requirements, and in other words, we couldn't build the project at all. Because of this, we're unable to support the bill. If housing development could be exempted from the bill, it certainly could bring us to a neutral position. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Flores Good afternoon, Chair Flores and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Rogan. I'm representing Clark County today, and we are opposing the bill as written. I want to thank Senator Cannizzaro for continuing to work with our local jurisdictions and other stakeholders to modify this bill to make sure that it's capturing those types of construction projects that are intended to be captured by this by the bill. Our concerns relate to affordable housing, has been mentioned by Mr. Brewer a moment ago, as well as the Nevada Housing Coalition. Clark County, as well as other jurisdictions, are always looking for ways to encourage private developers and nonprofit developers in the affordable housing space, including by waiving fees and providing other benefits to them in exchange for the provision of affordable housing in our community, which has been mentioned as an important need. Under the bill as written, that would increase costs substantially for those projects, perhaps making them not being able to pencil out and not being built at all because of that. In addition to our nonprofits that may be affected by this, as has been mentioned before, but also small businesses as well. In our aviation sector, we have a lot of small businesses that occupy McCarran International Airport. Harry Reid Airport now. If we are giving a break in any type to them, whether it's a lease or any other provision that allows them to get some benefit from that, their tenant improvement projects would now be subject under the bill as written to prevailing wage, and certainly we would like to work with the senator to make sure that we're not capturing those types of projects. So I look forward to working with her, and I thank you for your time today.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Good afternoon, Richard Nagel for the record. This bill is missing something, and basically what it said, it's given a free ride to people to come over from California and get better wages. So I think it should say, be amended to give priority to not only to Nevada registered contractors, but Nevada-based contractors, and employees of that contractor should be Nevada residents. Otherwise, again, a lot of the buildings were built without a state labor, and we're only doing this for nothing. It's not going to benefit our people. So I think that we need some kind of amendment in that aspect to make it a Nevada-based contractor would be more applicable so that we don't put our people out of work. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Good afternoon, Chair Flores, members of the committee. Paul Moratkin with the Vegas Chamber. First, I'd like to thank the Senate Majority Leader for convening and organizing a stakeholder meeting several days ago. This meeting was productive to hear the proponents object to the bill and also to clarify some language issues that we saw from the Chamber perspective in the bill. Our intent is, of course, to come to a resolution with a possible amendment that's being currently circulated for consideration. But a couple of areas the Chamber brought up in the stakeholder meeting was about some of the vagueness and definitions in Section 3.2. Some of the language currently is what we find would be exceptionally difficult to comply with, what incidental expenses could even include. For example, in Section 5.1, also clarifying some of the rebates that are offered from the private sector and part of those lease agreements. But again, very much appreciate the Senate Majority Leader for bringing the bill forward, for having the stakeholder meeting, and we believe, and it's our intent, that we'll be able to come to a resolution and remove our concerns from the bill, and we'll continue to work on this. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. Carrie Kramer on behalf of NAAP. For all of the reasons previously mentioned, we're in opposition. We also would like to very much thank the Senate Majority Leader for her time and holding the stakeholder meetings, and we look forward to continuing to work with her. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Anybody else in Carson City? Seeing none, we'll go to Las Vegas. Opposition.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Ann Barnett. I'm the CEO for the Nevada Contractors Association, representing well over 450 members in the construction industry, including signatory and non-signatory contractors. In regard to SB 226, we want to thank the bill sponsor and bill proponents for bringing stakeholders together to discuss SB 226. We want to remind the committee that NCA has worked as hard as anyone else to ensure that Nevada has strong prevailing wage laws. We also believe that the construction market, both public and private, should be fair for all contractors. Construction has been a positive force in Southern Nevada for decades, and even more so in the past few years. With that being said, we do have concerns about SB 226 and the ways that it expands public works laws into private development and private construction projects. And with me, I have contractors who will expand on those concerns a little bit more. But we look forward to working with the bill sponsor and bill proponents to find ways to achieve what they want in SB 226 while also supporting economic development within the construction industry. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Flores. My name is Mark Hobaika. I am a board member on the NCA down here in Las Vegas. I'm also the vice president of a construction company, a general contractor here in Las Vegas. I've had the experience over my 30 years plus here in Southern Nevada, working as an architect and also working for a public agency for over 17 years, nearly 17 years in the public works realm, and now building Nevada public works projects as a general contractor. I have a few items on this bill that are concerning. Obviously, it's very broadly written, and I'm just going to point out a few of the items that are of concern. In my time in a public agency, it was the city of Henderson. I'm not speaking on behalf of them, but I was the redevelopment agency for a few years. Bill speaks about increasing redevelopment opportunities in the state, and unfortunately, I believe that's the complete opposite. Redevelopment projects, when I was in charge of that in Henderson, relied on some public assistance, whether that was reduced land cost because of blight or brownfield or contamination, but invited private money and private developers to build in those redevelopment areas. Water Street District is one of those areas, and it is flourishing now because of the redevelopment opportunities that were presented and some of those incentives. If this bill was in place today, those projects probably would not have moved forward, and those developers would have just chosen to go someplace else outside of a redevelopment area. And second item I wanted to point out is the fact that, if a project is financed in whole or in part with public money, we, in my company, we build public works projects. That's what we focus on all the time. We embrace prevailing wage and our union brothers that do that work for us. But when it comes to a developer project where it's, say, a fire station that a development agreement requires them to build for that public entity from North Las Vegas, City of Las Vegas, City of Henderson, those developers obviously are building on private land and then are turning that project over to the city once complete. Obviously, those projects would increase the cost of those projects and would increase, obviously, taxpayers' bottom line if they were subject to those prevailing wage laws. I built a project in Henderson like that, but at the time we decided to build that fire station with city money, so the developer provided the money of what it would cost if they were to build it. And unfortunately, that money did not end up being enough. It actually cost the city of Henderson about $1.5 to $2 million more.
And sir, I apologize. I'm going to
simply
cut you
because
off. We hit the 2-minute mark. However, if there's any additional remarks that you wanted to submit, please make sure you submit them via email to our committee staff, and I'll make sure the whole committee gets them. Thank you for your testimony.
I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, individual in opposition, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Cam Walker. I am on the Government Affairs Committee with the NCA, as well as work for Sletton Construction of Nevada. We are represented, we work with 5 different unions here in Southern Nevada. I'm here in opposition to the bill, but appreciate the efforts of all involved in bringing forth something that can continue to look at protecting prevailing wage. I think one of the concerns is the unaffected consequences that come from this and sharing it in such a way that we don't really recognize all of the ways that it can be disruptive. Like my colleagues mentioned before, I won't reiterate those, but also development in Southern Nevada as we look at oversizing or expanding utilities that are going to be turned over to a governmental agency. Those would now fall under that area of a public work, even though they're expanding those utilities and then they're going to be turned over to those agencies. I think if we look around Southern Nevada and see different projects that have gone on, I was sitting back reflecting upon a land transfer that just recently occurred where Station Casinos is looking at a project out in Henderson, and they traded land for another piece of property based upon this bill. My understanding is it would fall under a public work now because someone could argue that they got a preferential treatment on the value of the land. because everyone feels their land is more valuable. So appreciate, again, what you've brought forward and look forward to working with you and the NCA does to make this a better bill for all of us at the state of Nevada.
And thank you for joining us. Next speaker in opposition, please. Is there anybody else in Las Vegas wishing to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 226? I don't believe I see anybody. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to speak in the neutral position for Senate Bill 226, Carson City or Las Vegas. I don't see anybody in Carson City, so we'll go to Las Vegas. Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Brett Harris, Nevada Labor Commissioner for the record. I'm just present to answer any questions regarding enforcement on the bill.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Thank you for joining us. We have no questions at this time.
Thank you.
Anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to speak in the neutral position? Seeing none, BPS, do we have anybody wishing to join us over the phone?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 226, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Majority Leader, any closing remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to just thank you and the committee for taking the time to hear this bill. Obviously, as you've heard, it is still a work in progress, but there were a couple of things that I just did want to highlight for members of the committee in terms of the purpose of this bill and what we are trying to accomplish. So I know that we had everyone down in Las Vegas stand up in support. We've got lots of support here, and I think you saw a lot of those, a lot of the folks who came in clearly from work, clearly from a job. Every single one of those people who stood up in Las Vegas, every single one of the folks behind me, every single one of those guys who took off of work to come here to let you know that they supported this bill, that represents a family, that represents a worker who is making enough to support their family, that represents a worker who has benefits, that they can seek medical care, and that's a worker who has taken the time to become highly skilled in what it is they are doing and to find a profession and a career. So when we talk about prevailing wage, it shouldn't be, and this committee should not just look at whether or not something, we may be paying a worker more on a job. Because what that means is that when we talk about in this building valuing things like career and technical education, about providing a pathway for folks to have a career and a profession, about being able to support their family so they can be there for their kids, so they can make sure their kids are getting a good education, so they're not worried about working, one job to the next or trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent or figure out how they're going to put food on the table. When we talk about supporting our economy and we talk about how is it that we are creating jobs and making sure that those jobs are here in Nevada for Nevadans and Nevada families, and how we're creating that whole economic support system, and how it is that we as public servants and as legislators are good stewards of taxpayer dollars, be that at the state level or at a local level, all of that should come into play, because that ultimately is what this bill is about. Every one of those workers and their families, how it is that we're supporting them in their careers, how it is that we are saying, if we're going to put taxpayer dollars into something that is going to provide a benefit to our community, that people who, and all these folks who stood up and said that they were in support of the bill earlier down in Las Vegas, the folks behind me, the guys who came here after work, they're taxpayers. This is their dollars too. We owe it to them to make sure that when we're investing those in public structures that are to provide benefit to our communities, when we're seeking to build things and we're looking to invest in them, that return on investment that far exceeds the small difference that you may pay a little bit more for good work, for projects that are built properly, that don't require a ton of change orders, that aren't having to be redone, that are sustainable and well-built things. That has to matter, and all those things that I've talked about have to matter. And that's why we've brought Senate Bill 226. And I think you've heard from some of the opposition a recognition that there have been, and some examples that were provided by my colleagues today, attempts to sort of circumvent what should fall under prevailing wage. What this body, what this state has already deemed is a way in which we do things when we pay prevailing wage, when we invest those taxpayer dollars. And so we are really trying to get at those pieces. Those lease buybacks are a huge concern. You heard some examples of those. Those should be subject to prevailing wage. I think that we owe it to the people of Nevada to make sure that we are consistent in that. I know that you've heard from some opposition where there may be some examples of, well, if there's an easement or there's one small fee paid. That is not what we are trying to get at with this particular bill, so we understand that there has to be some work on the language, and that's why you've heard a dedication from all of us to do so. I do think also that there is a balance that can be struck between a fee being waived or potentially some other piece of an affordable housing or a nonprofit project versus a situation where a nonprofit might be utilized in order to try to just circumvent those current prevailing wage laws. And what this should and cannot become, and is not our intent, is some sort of battle between affordable housing and prevailing wage. We have to be invested in workers. We also have to be invested in affordable housing. So we're working to address those concerns as well, but they are not antithetical to each other, and they do not exist in opposition to one another. And I think that that is really one of the pieces that this committee should hear when you hear about prevailing wages, that we really are focused on making sure we're investing those dollars properly. So we're going to continue to work on this bill. I am hopeful that we're going to be able to bring an amendment that is going to satisfy at least a good portion of the opposition and be able to explain that to the members of the committee. And again, I just want to thank everyone, and certainly every worker who took time out of their day to come here to let you know that when you invest in their jobs, that matters. And so I just want to say thank you to the committee, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Senate Majority Leader. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 226. Thank you again for the presentation. I am going to run out to a quick meeting. Vice Chair will take over. The next bill presentation will be on Senate Bill 271. And with that, we'll open up the hearing on Senate Bill 271.
Good afternoon, Senator Neal. Thank you for being here today to present Senate Bill 271. It's always great to see you, and please begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you for that. So maybe I'll let. But I was thinking while we're letting the crowd leave, I should just join this committee. You know, I should just get back on. All right. So I am here to present SB 271, and I want to mention that we do have Director Jenkins down south if there's any questions related to the actual NERC office. I'll have her kind of manage those and deal with those questions. All right. So why did I bring SB 271? So over the interim, and probably over a series of years, right, NERC has had probably its share of complaints on, number one, how long it takes for a complaint to be reviewed. A complaint could walk through the door and there could be an average of 3 years before it's actually resolved. Also, there have been, and my constituents have said that they wanted to make sure that who was reviewing the complaint, whether or not it was a paralegal or not, that they actually had the proper knowledge in order to go in and identify issues in the complaint, rather than say, I don't really see anything there. But the question that was posed and I guess complained about is whether or not those particular paralegals or folks that are not licensed attorneys, whether or not they actually know the issues that they should be identifying and searching for when it comes to harassment, discriminatory practices, and other. And so I decided to bring a bill that would strengthen NERC a little bit. It doesn't go too far, but at least puts us on the pathway to try to move forward to strengthen a state agency. There is a fiscal note on this bill because some of the things that I'm asking them to do will cost a little bit of money. So just to kind of jump into the bill, in Section 2, basically it just specifies that an attorney that works for the commission must review the complaint and prepare all the findings of fact related to the investigation and the final disposition. Section 2, sub 2 basically states that a paralegal that is employed with the commission must do some annual training around continuing education of constitutional law, state law, and federal law related to unlawful discriminatory practices. Section 2, sub 3, basically, I wanted to create a pipeline into NERC to allow the NERC to create a commission so they could have internships for law students and also volunteer program, pro bono programs so that attorneys can come in and provide legal services. The idea there is to try to, create more public interest attorneys and also to expand interest in our own law school students to want to get into public service and public interest law, and other entities actually create a pathway for attorneys to come in and start to share some work, whether or not it's internship, clinic, or other. Section 3, basically, I'm adding new language here which says that if a complaint is filed, I wanted the commission to look at the historical patterns and practices of an agency, and this applies to public and private employers. And the reason why I wanted the, I would say, serial abuses to come into play is because sometimes we might have a public employer or a private employer that has engaged in has a history of actual discriminatory practices. And I don't think that should be overlooked when a complaint is brought forward in terms of whether or not it should be reviewed or not. And sub B, section 3, I added nonfeasance and malfeasance. And the reason why I brought this up is because dealing with constituents over the biennium and probably prior to the biennium, talking about what happens when a public entity fails to act and they have an obligation to do so. That typically has not been in the law, and neither has been malfeasance where there is just wrongful conduct by a public official. And so I wanted to put those acts into law because I think they're more common than we believe. I also think that when someone has a duty to perform a particular activity and they fail to do it, that nonfeasance should come up. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So I think I had this in prior hearings, probably when I had a whistleblower statute in 2019, where failure to act when there's an obligation to do so. One example of that would be putting false records in someone's employee file, and the reason why you know you're doing it is because you want to make sure that the person won't promote, or you're just trying to put dirt in their employee file. So I passed that legislation in, I believe it was 2019. But technically, a public employer would have the obligation to make sure that those kinds of activities, those kind of retaliatory activities, don't occur, or at least do the act of trying to remove that from the person's file. And so just simply wrongful conduct by a public official, there were instances that came to my attention where a confidential HR complaint was leaked. And that in of itself is problematic because there are already rules around an HR complaint and how it should be treated by human resources, and the idea that city or state officials would then leak that complaint to the complainant's potential grievance that they were having a grievance about is just wrongful conduct in general. The sub 2 in section 3 basically says the same thing, where it applies to not the nonfeasance and malfeasance, but it applies to the private employer around the historical discriminatory practices and determining whether or not an investigation is warranted. Section 4 just lays out what should happen within this 18 months. So basically, the commission must make a final disposition of the complaint within 18 months. And if they fail to resolve the issue in 18 months, then they must provide notice to the complainant on why that final disposition was not able to be completed in the 18 months. And the reason why I put that in there is because we can't have a case just going on for 3 and 4 years at NERC, right? It creates consternation, anxiety, and people who are using NERC can't afford a private attorney, right? It's the state's way in order to deal with a discriminatory complaint without necessarily going to the EEOC, although they have the option to file with the EEOC, but we gave them the state option many years ago. In section 4, sub 3, basically I added that the commission may close an investigation of the complaint of final disposition. Basically, if a person is verbally or physically abusing or threatening a member of the commission. And this is not just regular cuss words. This is not the person who calls on the phone and says, you know what, it's basic cuss words. We have to go a little bit level higher than that. But I know that people are upset, and they can call and say, you know, I'm going to blow up this office today or something like that. And so I wanted to protect that. In section 5, I put in a piece on the appeals process. And the reason why I put in the piece of an appeals process for NERC, if you've ever done this or if you've ever had a constituent that went through NERC and the complaint was maybe NERC didn't find any information that warranted continuing the investigation, you do have the right to appeal. However, it's not clear on exactly how that process works. And if you're just a lay person, you'd be thinking, oh, I have to write a brief to the regional EEOC in LA and I have to do this whole thing. And you find out it's a single page and it's a pre-printed kind of form, but you would know that. And it's not even something that you can even find. So if you go to the Los Angeles EEOC website, you'll be like, okay, so how do I do this? How do I write the appeal to try to save my my discriminatory complaint? And so I wanted to make sure that NERC could at least provide a sample so that a person is just kind of not left without some kind of avenue in order to establish how they go through the process of an appeal. In the back of the bill in section 7, basically it gives the effective date, and in sub 3, line 10, section 6, it's tying it to another bill, which you guys heard in this committee on my housing discrimination bill. So once I clean that up, we'll be able to hopefully move that bill and have the companion piece, because I do want NERC to become a HUD qualifying agency. And with that, I will open myself up for questions.
Thank you very much, Senator Neal. Thank you for bringing Senate Bill 271 to our committee. Members, any questions for the sponsor? Senator Daley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And I think you answered my question on when it's going to go into effect. Because I was reading, I said, so when exactly is it going to go into effect? When I read that, when something else happens, so I think you answered that question. But maybe it's just me, and you can come talk to me or whatever. But I read section 3, subsection 1B, and I read it like 3 times today, and it still doesn't make sense to me when I go back up and I say that, you know, the commission must consider any acts of malfeasance. I get the first sentence, and then any findings of facts of disposition, I'm assuming from the person the complaint was against, alleging unlawful discriminatory practice. And then it seems like there's a word missing when we get to must address allegations. And who made the allegations? Was that in the complaint? What do they consider? It just didn't read to me. And maybe it's just me. If it makes sense to everybody else, we can move on. But it didn't make sense to me. There's a word, or it's not clear who's judging who or what they're looking at, or who did what action, I suppose, is when I read it. Not trying to, it just didn't make sense to me. I read it 5 times.
No, that's fine. So Senator Dina Neal, for the record. So when I think I know exactly what you mean, but basically it says that, you know, any act of nonfeasance or malfeasance with regard to the complaint on behalf of the agency or public officer or public employee thereof. So you're looking at the acts, right? With regard to nonfeasance and malfeasance that could be done by a public officer, or it could be a public employee or an agency. And then when it says any findings of fact and final disposition of such a complaint alleging an unlawful discriminatory practice in employment must address any allegation of nonfeasance and malfeasance by the agency. So the way I read it was that if NERC does a findings of fact and a final disposition, they at least must address the fact that they didn't find nonfeasance, they didn't find malfeasance. So, but they at least must state that I looked for it, I looked through your circumstances, I looked through the documentation that you sent, and I don't see evidence of that.
Yeah, if I can follow up again.
Please go ahead.
So thank you. When you read through, so you're saying the commission has to look to see if there were any findings in the determination that was made by the award, or who the complaint was against, or evidence that they put back as a defense. They need to look to see if the city council or
Yes.
whoever the complaint was against acted in good faith, did all of the other stuff. Like I said, I got the first sentence and the first half of the last one, and I got to that, but I think I got it.
Senator Dina Neal, for the record, only the commission is the one that does the final disposition or any findings of fact, right? So the city, the complainant or the city or entity, agency is not going to be the one that's going to do that findings of fact. So typically how it happens, you know, person submits the complaint, and then the entity who they're complaining about is allowed to submit documentation, basically either probably more than likely alleging the opposite of what the complaint is, right? And then NERC comes in and reviews both sides, and everything that they review is confidential to the point until that final disposition, and they say, we either see a finding of fact where there's a discriminatory practice that we need to examine or not. But even the witnesses that they will talk to are not made known to either party. They just go down the list. And then in this case, because they're alleging that nonfeasance or malfeasance occurred, meaning that someone put in the complaint, well, I believe under charter there was a duty to perform X, and here are the documentation that proves that the duty existed, they failed to perform the duty, and therefore I was harmed or injured because of that, that NERC would then have to, in their final disposition, say that we reviewed nonfeasance, we reviewed the charter policy or whatever that you presented, and we don't find that there was a duty or under the law, right? And then in their disposition say, we don't see nonfeasance or malfeasance, et cetera.
And thank you for that explanation, now that it reads a little smoother now that I'm getting who is doing what and who's making the decision. Final question, if I can, Mr.
Please
Vice
go ahead,
Chair.
Senator Daley.
Doesn't NERC, and I know this whole 18-month thing, and I know it can drag out, and unfortunately I've been involved in some of these things before, but at some point, I thought it was 6 months, maybe I'm remembering something else. If they haven't made a decision or whatever, they'll issue a letter that says you can go forward and file a lawsuit if you'd like. Is that still at 6 months, or is that still in the law? And how often does that happen? I know I've seen those letters go out.
Senator Dina Neal, for the record, so in Section 6, the strikeout, it was 12 months, and they have to complete it says complete the investigation within 100 days after it receives the complaint unless it is impracticable to do so, and then make the final disposition of the complaint now within 18 months instead of a year. And so, and this is probably something that Kara Jenkins can add more into in terms of the piece, but I know there's a period of time in which it runs. You still have, I think it's 300 days from the initial time until it accrues. And so if they decide that, hey, we're not going to do this, you still get, she can clarify this. I don't know when you get the letter for the right to sue. If the letter for the right to sue has to be the final disposition occurs, or you can still get that right to sue even though they're not going to manage the case and didn't find anything in favor of what you're going to do. Because my understanding, from what I've seen from constituencies, you still have the right to go get a private attorney if they find out that NERC doesn't see anything there, but you can still go get a private attorney and then continue to manage the issue.
Thank you very much, Senator Neal. Members, any additional questions for Senator Neal? And Senator Neal, I think I have one question perhaps for Director Jenkins. The new language proposed in section 4, sub 3, regarding the commission may close an investigation of a complaint without a final disposition if the commission determines that the complainant verbally or physically abuses or threatens a member of the commission. The commission may not close an investigation without a final disposition for any other reason. I'm just wondering, how does the commission currently handle if they have a complainant and they feel that there's been verbal or physical abuse or threatening statements, things like that? I just wonder what's current commission policy.
Good evening, members of the committee, Vice Chair, Senator Neal. My name is Kara Jenkins. I am the Director or Administrator for NERC, the Equal Rights Commission, for the record. To your question, when there is abuse of my staff, we look at what the abuse is. If it's someone who's angry or frustrated, of course, we carry on with the complaint. I believe when it becomes verbal, more than verbal abuse or threatening someone's safety, it is against statute to threaten a public employee. We will then figure out how we can maybe transfer the case to EEOC, our partners, if it's an employment case. So as it pertains to employment cases, because we investigate employment discrimination, housing discrimination, and public accommodation discrimination. But for your question specifically, Vice Chair, we're going to talk about employment discrimination. We would transfer it to EEOC. We would see them through their complaint, but we would see that maybe we don't want to risk injury or threat of harm or abuse to our staff. What this section does, though, it provides some relief for more aggressive complainants who traditionally, when we have a complaint, we see it through. At any point in time, you can request a right to sue as soon as a complaint becomes a formal charge. So what happens is, and Senator Neal's accurate, once a person files a complaint or a complainant or a charging party files a complaint with NERC, at that point it's an allegation of discrimination, unfounded, and so we have to look into the evidence of it. Once we actually enroll the case, if it's an employment case, it becomes a charge. It then gets a NERC number and an EEOC number. We've now alerted with that EEOC number to our partners in Los Angeles, the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that we are now taking this case. The state of Nevada is taking this employment case that you could otherwise take. So then we frame the charge, and then at that point, at any time during the investigatory process where we ask for mediation or try to settle the complaint, or we're doing our fact finding with the investigators, the charging party can request the right to sue. And let me just back up really quick. Once we frame the charge, we've already established that jurisdiction has been met and that it is timely. So as Senator Neal had mentioned, if it's an employment case, they have 300 days from their last date of harm to file with us, with the state of Nevada or EEOC, for us to take the charge in. The thought being that if the complaint is longer, witnesses grow stale, and that maybe it's harder to get witnesses, or just for public policy reasons, you can't hold someone responsible for close to a year and not say anything. So once we actually frame the charge, we've met prima facie jurisdiction, just to be clear. And once we are now fully enrolled the charge, the case or the complaint, it has a NERC number and an EEOC number. EEOC is alerted that we are investigating the case, but at any time, if we need to transfer for abuse or share it with them, they will take the case. We have a very good relationship with the EEOC. And also for the complainant, their time is told. So if we do the investigation and we do not have enough evidence to substantiate discrimination, they can, at the end of our dismissal of our investigatory phase, which can be anywhere from 1 to 2 years, and we can talk about timelines too, the 18 months as well, that person has a right, and in a letter from me, they get a right to sue, meaning that although we were unable to find enough evidence to substantiate your allegation of discrimination, you may now take this to court under federal law, under Title VII, and sue in federal court. At that point, though, it gets very expensive for the complainant. They really like that we can settle the cases confidentially. Both parties are happy, and we have a very good success rate of doing that. But anywhere during that time, they can get a right to sue. But some of the complainants that we get, and it's rare, can be abusive. They can harass my staff. They can say very concerning things. And we've never had an opportunity to just say, we are going to, for the safety of our staff, of our commission, we're going to stop this complaint and just dismiss it. We always run a charge through, even if it's for interests that could be scary or seem a little bit aggressive or contrary to the mission of NERC. We do get folks who file, and we do have armed security in our office. That's very rare, but to your question, Vice Chair, that seems to be what I see in that section. And I hope I also answered the other question from the prior member, the prior question about how we look at cases and when you can get the right to sue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Administrator Jenkins. Members, any questions for the Administrator? No? Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Senator. Not seeing any other questions, I'd like to open it up for testimony in support of Senate Bill 271. I'll start here in Carson City. If there's anyone who wishes to be heard in support of Senate Bill 271. Not seeing anyone here. Down at the Sawyer Building, if there's anyone who wishes to speak in support of Senate Bill 271, now's your chance. But if not, broadcasting, if we could go to the phone lines in support of Senate Bill 271.
If you would like to testify in support of SB 271, please press star 9 now. Take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you, Broadcasting. I'd like to now go to opposition to Senate Bill 271 here in Carson City. If there's anyone opposed who wants to be heard on the record, now's your chance. Okay, I'll go to the Sawyer Building. Anyone in opposition to Senate Bill 271? Not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, if we go to the phone lines, anyone who's opposed to Senate Bill 271?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SB 271, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue, or raise your hand in the Zoom window. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. I'd now like to go to neutral testimony on Senate Bill 271 up here in Carson City. If anyone wishes to be heard in the neutral position. All right, I'll go down to the Sawyer Building. If anyone wishes to be heard in the neutral position on Senate Bill 271.
Good evening, Vice Chair Kara Jenkins for the record, Administrator of the Nevada Equal Rights Commission. The agency is neutral on this bill and just wanted to note that we do have a fiscal note attached to this legislation to accommodate the costs that we foresee if this bill is signed into law. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Administrator. Thank you for your testimony. Don't see anyone else down at the Sawyer Building. Broadcasting, if we can go to the phone lines. Neutral on Senate Bill 271.
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 271, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. Senator Neal, any closing comments you'd like to make? Thank you for presenting Senate Bill 271 today.
Thank you, Senator Dina Neal, for the record. Thank you, Senate Government Affairs, for hearing this bill. You guys will see me again, I think, on Friday. And then hopefully, in your wisdom, great wisdom, you will allow SB 271 to pass out of this committee. And I thank you for all of your questions.
Thank you very much for presenting Senate Bill 271. And we will see you on Friday, Senator. We are very fortunate to have Assemblyman Watts here. Thank you for joining us, and appreciate your being here on Senate Bill 94.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Howard Watts for the record. I just got done presenting a bill in Assembly Natural Resources, so the timing worked out great. And I hope to not take nearly as long with this bill presentation as that one did. It's my pleasure to present Senate Bill 94 for your consideration today. This bill was recommended by the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Natural Resources, which I had the pleasure of chairing during the last interim. One of the issues that came up, for the first time, the interim committee and the Committee on Public Lands, in addition to holding meetings in rural communities across the state, held its first meeting on tribal lands at the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, and dedicated time to solicit feedback about issues affecting tribal governments and tribal communities, and suggestions for potential policies. And one of the issues that came up was related to tribal liaison positions, both improving the effectiveness of our tribal liaison program, as well as creating stronger opportunities to allow employees in tribal government and those with experience in tribal communities, creating a stronger pathway for them to be employed in the state and work as tribal liaisons. And so that is where the kind of genesis of SB 94 came from. I will note, there's some significant fiscal notes on this bill. It's not this, since this is not the Money Committee. Those are going to be worked out, or are going to need to be worked out in order for the bill to move forward, and it's really related to the scope of the bill, which I will discuss as I walk through it. So briefly, Section 1 modifies existing statute related to tribal liaisons. So our law, as adopted in 2019, required agencies to designate a tribal liaison who reports directly to the office of the agency. What this does is instead requires the employment of a tribal liaison, and notes that that is a new position in the classified service of the state. The reason for that is that tribal liaisons have a varied effectiveness to this point, because that is essentially a title that's getting added on to somebody's existing job roles and responsibilities. And so it's not necessarily the main focus. Some people dedicate a lot of time, attention, and energy into that. Others, and I don't want to disparage anyone, as we know, we've got state employees that are working extremely hard, are doing more than one full-time position's job, and may have the role of tribal liaison put on top of that. And so what we're trying to do is create dedicated positions in state agencies that are focused on serving as that liaison between that agency, that aspect of state government, and tribal governments. And so that's what Section 1 is seeking to do. And further, it spells out the responsibilities of a tribal liaison. So you can see in sub 5, A, B, and C, kind of the existing responsibilities. This envisions this as being a fully fleshed out role, adding the additional responsibilities and roles in items D through L. So without reading those specifically to you, that's essentially kind of the format of what Section 1 is seeking to do, to create this as a specific position and expand its duties so that it is a workload for a dedicated position, rather than being a title added on to an existing state employee. Section 2, and I know this might catch people off guard because it's not in blue, but this is what has the creation of the position of tribal liaison, lays out the grade that it would be, and then lays out the experience that's required, including familiarity with tribal governments and tribal indigenous affairs. And then one of the things that I want to highlight here is in Section 2, Sub 4, we provide a hiring preference first to a member of a tribal nation that is based in, at least in part, in Nevada, and then second to any indigenous person applying for the job. And then the other thing that I'd really like to highlight is so that's Sub 4A. Sub 4B is that we allow for the acceptance of at least 6 years of relevant employment with an Indian tribe, with a tribal government, as equivalent to a bachelor's degree. And again, the purpose of that is to create an expanded kind of employment pathway for folks that have worked in tribal government and then might be interested in taking all that experience, 6 years or more. That's a lot of experience that could be beneficial to the state, and making sure that we allow folks to bring that to bear even if they don't have a bachelor's degree, because they have a lot of the practical experience that would be beneficial to the state as a tribal liaison. And that is the overview of the bill at a high level. I know we have folks from tribal governments that would like to provide some testimony on this, so I'm going to keep my remarks brief, and I'm glad to answer any questions that you, Mr. Chair, or the committee may have.
Assemblyman, I need you to do the whole thing again. Members, any questions? Senator Goycochea, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it says, Sub 4, Section 1, each state agency that communicates with Indian tribes on a regular basis. Do we have a feel for how many agencies we're really talking about? And, because typically, the tribes would communicate with most agencies.
That's a great question, Senator Goycochea. Thank you. Howard Watts, for the record, through you, Mr. Chair, to the Senator. So that's a good question. I will follow up with you, because I know that there is a list of current tribal liaisons for agencies, and so that would give you kind of an idea of the agencies that currently have one. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every agency that should qualify under this section of statute does currently have a liaison. And I agree with you that most state agencies do or should be in communication with tribes. And again, without going too far into the money committee aspect of it, that's really what affects that, is how many agencies are we asking to employ a dedicated person. I would love to see that in all of the agencies that should. That's going to be a significant price tag, and so I think what I'm interested in doing is working with members of this body and with tribal members, tribal government leaders, to prioritize some top agencies as a first step, and really focus on getting a few positions in some of the key agencies, and then we can evaluate it on a going forward basis.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Daley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Assemblyman. Similar question, right? I was just thinking of that. I mean, so agencies, and I don't know the definition, right? Does it include the Gaming Control Board, or are they an agency or not? Not that that's the question, but certainly agencies like DOT. I'm not sure, like the Labor Commissioner would need to, but somebody within the Department of Business and Industry, because they got like 18 boards and commissions, right? So maybe there's some consolidation. Obviously, the fiscal note's going to be a hurdle. Yeah, I support the bill and hope you can get it narrowed down to what you need to target. But some agencies, environmental protection, I think would be one as well. I don't know that DMV needs to as much, right? It's just finding those right agencies. That was my question.
Thank you very much for that question, Senator Daly. To you, Howard Watts for the record. So, yeah, I agree. And there actually is a definition for agencies in NRS, and I don't have it in front of me, but it is very expansive. So it would include both, you brought up environmental protection. So agencies include the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and all of the divisions under it are also agencies. And so that's where some of the dynamics that are at that we've run into. And again, it is tricky because I think particularly within environmental protection, there are a lot of specific issues. So that's the thing that we're trying to figure out. But in my mind, at a minimum, at kind of those cabinet level agencies, that to me sounds like a good place to start with DOT and DCNR and so on. But I also understand your point that, again, maybe we want to get down into the nuance of do we want one at DMV, or do we want to maybe move that over and have one at DCNR and one at DEP? So we're gonna work on that.
Yeah, and I think Senator at the other end mentioned that regularly interact, right? So not every agency does, right? So it's you gotta find the right ones. I'm hoping you have success on that.
Thank you.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, Assemblyman, thank you for the presentation. And at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 94, Senate Bill 94, to please come forward. Good afternoon, welcome, whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Jennifer Lanahan, Jennifer Lanahan. I'm here on behalf of the Las Vegas Paiute Tribe and the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, and I appreciate your time in considering this bill, and we support it and really would appreciate your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Chair and committee members, my name is Andrew Lee Pilbit, last name L-E-P-E-I-L-B-E-T, no more. I am the chairman of the United Veterans Legislative Council, and you're probably wondering why I'm here. Actually, our tribes have a high percentage of veterans in all the groups. And I know through the Department of Veteran Services, they've been trying hard to reach out to these veterans in the tribes. It's a difficult thing when you don't have a full-time individual for this task, which is needed. I believe we have 17 tribes. 27? Yeah, so it's a lot of them, and it's higher than the percentage in the public, the general public, in terms of veterans. So that was our concern in the bill is the money there to support this, but we want to reach out to these veterans and get their benefits that they have coming to them. So the United Veterans Legislative Council, representing 279,000 vets in the state, are in support of this bill.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Hello, Will Adler for the record, representing Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. I first want to thank Assemblymember Watts for bringing forward a Senate bill from the Committee of Government Affairs. But I would like to say that the benefits that this bill could provide tribal communities are kind of hard to overstate. It is a difficult process for a tribe to actually contact the state of Nevada, and it is one where there's a lot of inconsistency when it comes to the tribal side of the equation too. Councils do turn over, memberships do turn over, and the experience on the tribal end does tend to turn over as well. And the person who had the contact or knew what to do or knew who to contact sometimes turns over as the council would turn over. So having a dedicated person in the state of Nevada who they could contact, know is there, and have a hotline essentially would be of great benefit to all tribal communities across the state. And we want to thank everyone involved for bringing Senate Bill 94 forward. I understand the fiscal note is one of concern, but I do think if we could limit it down or have it to a cabinet level or a dedicated position to work in the like agencies, it would still have a similar effect and be very beneficial to all. And Chair Phoenix would like to share his comments as well. He couldn't make it on the call. He had to go to an event at 5:30, but he wanted to say he's in full support of this bill as well, and that he thinks it would bring great benefit to his tribe indeed. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
And thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Olivia Tanager. I'm the Environmental Justice Program Manager with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, and I live in Senate District 13. In 2019, PLAN was proud to support AB 264 to have state agencies designate tribal liaisons and work to improve collaboration with Nevada's indigenous communities. While this bill was definitely a step in the right direction, SB 94 would ensure that there is a dedicated staff person who can focus on prioritizing clear and frequent communication with tribes. This is of paramount importance as Nevada faces critical decisions that impact resources and the future of our state on Native land. We must remember that we are all on stolen Native land, and good communication with our tribes here in Nevada is, in my view, the least that this state can do. Thank you, and please support SB 94.
And thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. My name is Paula Luna, and I'm the Operations Manager at Battleborn Progress, and I'm here today in support of SB 94. The Indigenous community deserves proper representation within the Nevada state government, given the historical and cultural significance their presence has on our state. Hiring tribal liaisons would ensure stronger communication between tribes and state government, creating better relationships and more effective consultation. With this bill, we can honor the Indigenous people of our state and make sure that their interests are heard and respected as the first stewards of the land and the first residents of the state of Nevada. This bill will give Indigenous community the respect and the voice they deserve and has too long been kept from them. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us again. Please.
Hello, my name is Teresa Melendez, and I'm an Indigenous organizer here in the state of Nevada, and I'm here, of course, in support of SB 94, and just wanted to do everything that was already said, but then also share another perspective. As a community organizer, I've talked with many of you and have worked on, help work on legislation and in off years, work in the communities as a tribal liaison myself. One of the things that we often see is a lot of times our state employees aren't familiar with the tribes, the tribal government systems, and so, find difficulties in performing their job. They haven't been trained to understand the tribal government systems. They probably haven't come from those community backgrounds, and so this bill would allow people make sure that folks who have the qualification to serve as a tribal liaison can best communicate with the tribes. And also, like, something that we don't think about, some things that often happen when the relationships aren't established between the tribes and the departments are lawsuits. So one cost savings would be we could avoid some lawsuits if folks know how to engage with each other and working on those relationships, and if our state government understands the tribal government system so that we can work more collaboratively together. That's it, miigwech.
And thank you. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Isaac Hardy, representing the Nevada Conservation League. We just want to echo the comments you've heard here today, and we are in full support. Thank you very much.
And thank you. I don't believe we have anybody wishing to join us in support of Senate Bill 94 in Las Vegas. BPS, do we have anybody wishing to join us over the phone? Support for Senate Bill 94.
If you would like to testify in support of SB 94, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good evening, committee. My name is Taylor Patterson. That is TaylorPatterson. I'm the Executive Director of Native Voters Alliance Nevada. I definitely will keep it short today. I think you've heard plenty of testimony from my colleagues about why this is a really important bill. I do want to echo some of the sentiments that Assemblyman Watts said in his presentation as well. that very often our community members are doing sort of this unofficial work for free, trying to help people create relationships with tribal governments and trying to teach people how to engage with tribal members and our sovereign governments, which actually we have 28 here in the state of Nevada, just to fact check that stat earlier. But this would allow a pathway for our folks and folks that are knowledgeable with tribal communities to be able to have new job opportunities. So with that, thank you for your time.
And thank you for calling in. BPS, next caller, please, in support of Senate Bill 94.
Good evening. My name is Brian Mason. I'm the chairman of the Shoshone-Paiute tribes. As chairman of one of the largest tribes in the state of Nevada, and a chairman that has government-to-government relationships with two states, Nevada and Idaho, the state of Nevada is definitely lacking. Tribal engagement in Idaho is constant. In Nevada, it is rare, if at all. A Native American Affairs liaison is a must at most agencies, if not all agencies. Tribal input in Nevada through the Constitution is the law. And while it's 2023, tribes are becoming educated. We are here, and we're sovereign nations. The state of Nevada and the governor's office needs this as well. In the Constitution of the United States, treaties are mentioned numerous times that give status with both the state and the U.S. government. So you can do this with tribal representation. A tribal representative is a must for the original Aboriginal people in Nevada, the Western Shoshone, the Northern Paiute, the Southern Paiute, and the Washoe tribes. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 94.
Caller 323 plus *6 to unmute. Caller 323 plus *6 to unmute. Caller 425, press *6 to unmute.
Caller, caller, you are unmuted. Please proceed.
Caller 425, you can proceed. You're unmuted. Caller 323, press 6 to unmute. Caller 323, press *6 to unmute. Public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition. BPS, do we have anybody wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 94?
If you would like to testify in opposition to SB 94, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this bill. I am an Indigenous educator, parent of 3 college students, and a student myself.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Citizen and
Could
a
you please
community leader.
could you please state your name for the record?
Mercedes Krause, for the record. You able to hear me?
Yes, we can. Please continue. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this bill. I'm an Indigenous educator, parent of 3 college students, a student myself, an engaged citizen, and a community leader. And from all of these lenses, I'm coming to you today to testify that there is a strong need for tribal liaisons, especially a liaison for the Nevada system of higher education. A fulfillment of trust and treaty obligations, as well as just full and fair community inclusion, needs to replace the lack of inclusion that has gone on for too long. We need the manpower, or better, we'll say person power, systemic action to make this happen in our education system and all of our branches of government oversight. Currently, only 19% of Native people attain college degrees. The numbers shrink as we reference a master's degree and a doctoral degree. Statewide, less than 1% among our college population are Native American. And one school that I was looking at in Southern Nevada had only 18 students, so 0.25% of the population. It's urgent that we have tribal representation in NSHE to support our tuition waiver process, increased enrollment, retention, and completion for our students, supports for current students to help this, and increasing effective recruiting. So it is for all of these support of SB 94. Tilo Mayeye.
Public line is open.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? Better said, is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 94?
Public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Okay. And is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition either in Carson City or Las Vegas? Seeing none, Assemblyman, any closing remarks you may have? Oh, excuse me, I skipped neutral. That's probably important. BPS, do we have anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position? And for those of you who are in Carson City, please come forward.
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 94, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hi, this is Randy Loneagle, Chairman of the Salmon Lake Paiute Tribe. Thank you, Chair and members of the board. I was calling in support of Senate Bill 94. Having a Native American tribal liaison within the state allows the 28 Nevada tribes a better outcome for open communication and understanding between the Nevada tribes and the state. Thank you.
And thank you. BPS, anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position?
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 94, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller 323, please press *6 to unmute. Caller 323, please press *6 to unmute. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And we'll come back to Carson City, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Kent LaFever, for the record. I serve as the administrator for State Public Works Division, and I also serve as the tribal liaison for the Department of Administration. We are neutral on this bill. However, we have reviewed the language of the bill, and we have filed a fiscal note on that bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Stacy Montooth. That's Stacey, last name Montooth, Montooth. I'm a citizen of the Walker River Paiute Nation, and I'm the executive director of the Nevada Indian Commission. That's a 58-year-old state agency which is charged with improving the quality of life for our 28 tribal nations, bands, colonies, and 52,000 urban Indians who choose to make Nevada their second home. I'd like to take time to thank the earlier speaker who mentioned our Native warriors. He's exactly correct. Native Americans volunteer to serve in the United States military in larger numbers than any other subpopulation, and that includes Native women. It seems apropos that that's mentioned today, the day that our country recognized Vietnam veterans. Me personally, 5 uncles and both of my dads are Vietnam veterans. On behalf of the Nevada Indian Commission, I want to go on the record about how tribal liaisons are used to help facilitate high-quality relationships with our tribal governments. Mr. Chair, I've actually written out my comments because I'm not really good at being neutral, so I want to make sure that I hit every single word. Tribal liaisons are embedded inside respective state agency, and as noted by Assemblyman Howard Watts, these liaisons occupy a variety of different position classifications. For example, the Department of Health and Human Services is currently hiring 2 tribal liaisons. One of them is being recruited as a health program specialist. That requires a bachelor's degree in health science, behavioral science, or a closely related field with 2 years of health-related experience. That health-related experience could be in research, collecting and analyzing data, statistics, developing objectives, protocols, procedures, providing health education services, evaluating programs' effectiveness, providing prevention, identification, or treatment services to individuals or to populations that have been diagnosed with life or health-threatening diseases, or even to investigate and prevent communicable or chronic diseases. The other position is a management analyst 1, which requires just a bachelor's degree in public or business administration, finance or social sciences, math, or a related field, and just 1 year of experience in research, development, evaluation, or revision of programs, organizations, methods, or procedures. You can see the variety of required qualifications, and because the various classifications don't recognize actual experience with Native American tribes, the Nevada Indian Commission more than often ends up serving as the resource for these positions to develop relationships on behalf of these liaisons. Just last week, on a Sunday, I was contacted by a department tribal liaison to find out how 3 of our tribal nations were faring as they had each announced declarations of emergencies that were prompted by the flooding. Now, the intent of NRS Chapter 233A is for the liaison to establish and cultivate relationships not just with these tribal governments, but during the regular course, the intent of NRS Chapter 233A is for the liaison to establish and cultivate relationships with not just these tribal governments, but all 28 tribal nations, so that regular course of business conducted by the state, but especially during emergency disasters, the state could provide needs for these services in these communities immediately. In my agency, except for my position, we're powered by an administrative assistant and a program officer, and no experience with tribal governments or an Indian experience is required for these positions. Thank you.
Oh, you hit it
for
perfect. I was about to tell
allowing-
you, I think we were surpassed the 2 minutes, but thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to
timing.
discuss how tribal liaisons are used to facilitate relations within the state of Nevada with our tribal people.
Thank you. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in the neutral position? Seeing none, now I may go back to the Assemblyman. Any closing remarks? Seeing none, with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 94.
Please be quiet.
It's starting.
Yes.
All right, Vice Chair, you're up.
Chair, thank you for trusting me with the gavel. I hope you don't regret it. But with that, I'd like to open the hearing on Senate Bill 262. Committee, we are very lucky to have our own chair, Senator Flores, here to present Senate Bill 262. Please proceed whenever you're ready, Chair.
Good afternoon, or good evening, esteemed members of the hardworking Committee on Government Affairs. I am Senator Edgar Flores, proudly representing Senate District 2. And on behalf of my constituents, I am presenting Senate Bill 162. I will have co-presenting alongside of me Commissioner Tick Segerblum, as you can see on the monitor. In fact, this conversation and the genesis of this bill initiated with constituents of ours going originally to Commissioner Segerblum and eventually making its way into this building. I also have, but in the interest of being efficient, Andres Rodriguez, who's in Las Vegas, PhD student from UNLV, a phenomenal friend of mine, who would also originally intended to co-present, but we'll have him testify during support testimony. Before I hand it over to Commissioner Segerblum, I'd like to very quickly walk through what we are doing. I have now had the pleasure of serving in the Government Affairs Committee, specifically in the Assembly, since 2015. I was the chair in 2017, I was the chair in 2019, I was the chair in 2021, and now I am the chair in 2023 on the Senate side. I make that point because since 2015, there hasn't been a single session where people do not come before this very body and sit before this very committee and explain if we can request if we can change the requirements for some of these boards, particularly because there is a unfortunate reality that there's not enough folks stepping up to serve on these very important boards. And I say that because we've done many modifications, we've changed many requirements to allow for some folk to serve longer because they couldn't serve anymore. And that's just, it's been a constant theme ever since I've had the pleasure of serving my constituents. I also bring up this point because in speaking with Commissioner Segerblum, and he'll elaborate further, they were hoping to appoint some great individuals to some particular boards, but unfortunately they were unable to do so because they were legal permanent residents. And I want to make a very important point. In the United States and in Nevada, non-U.S. citizens serve in our military, non-U.S. citizens are teachers, Non-U.S. citizens work in the health industry. Non-U.S. citizens own businesses. Non-U.S. citizens partake in the most critical sectors of our economy, of what we consider essential functions for our society. They participate in all of them. And if that's the truth and that's the reality we have, then the next question is, why aren't they serving on some of our boards? I also wanted to make it abundantly clear, I do immigration law for a living. That is my passion. Immigration law is very fluid. And what I mean by that is the status of an individual is very fluid. There may be a year where you are here in the U.S. with DACA. There may be a different year where you're a legal permanent resident, and there may be a different time where you're a U.S. citizen. I use my own father as an example. My father became a U.S. citizen in 2019, but my father has done a lot for this community in Nevada, has done a lot of work in Nevada, and there is no difference between my father in 2018 and my father in 2019. His passion for Nevada is the same. So the only difference was whether or not he was a citizen, and whether or not he could have served on the board would have differed based on the year, just because he became a citizen. So I wanted to put that out there. So what the bill does, it eliminates the requirement that a member of a town advisory board or citizens advisory council be a qualified elector, and a qualified elector is a U.S. citizen over the age of 18 who is a resident. And that's the purpose, that's the objective, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. Before we open it up for questions, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Commissioner Sagerblum, which I need to say thank you, Commissioner. I understand you're obviously overwhelmed with everything you're doing, and I appreciate you waiting this out with us. So thank you, and I appreciate you co-presenting this with me.
Good evening, Commissioner Sagerblum. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Commissioner. Please proceed.
Okay, great. First, so great to see all of you that I have served with. I can't believe Pete is still there. Is Pete still there? But anyway, it's
he's waving, Commissioner.
All of you. And listening to this last couple hours has really brought back a lot of great memories for me. So thank you so much for allowing me to do this. One of the things we do in the county commission is we have zoning changes, variances, things dealing with homeowners and businesses and things, development that are going in. And when people file for those applications, there's a process you go through where you start in the neighborhood. And we have what are called neighborhood boards. And those are divided by, I have a Sunrise Manor, I have Winchester, I have Paradise, all town boards that these individuals serve on. We appoint those people to serve on those boards. They hear from their neighbors exactly what the problem is. They make decisions. Sometimes it's chickens in yards. It's all kinds of things. But it's really the best form of democracy because it's the people who live in the neighborhoods making decisions. And they're not decisions, permanent decisions, they're recommendations that will come to me as a county commissioner, and then I will have to vote on it. But I do listen very closely to what the neighbor is saying because the reality is, at the top level of government, we don't often appreciate the impact that some decision is going to make. And a developer will come in and try to build a big project in the neighborhood, and the neighbors scream bloody murder, and rightly so. And we listen to that, and we say, no, sorry, you can't build that there. If you want to build a little bit of extra house, or you want to build a little portable house, or you want to do other things, and the neighbors say that's fine, then that's great. But these town boards serve a really fundamental purpose for democracy. One of the interesting things is, though, because it is a volunteer position, and it is at nighttime, it takes a lot of hours, and a lot of times you have to sit through these meetings like we're sitting through today, where neighbors come and scream bloody murder for hours on end. It's tough sometimes to find people to serve on those boards. So we look around, we look for people also that represent the community when we reach out and try to ask somebody to serve on the board. So last year, I reached out, found a nice guy, submitted his name. He seemed like a perfect person. He owned a house in the neighborhood. He had a good job. And we ran up the totem pole, or the flagpole. Sorry, I don't mean to offend anybody. The flagpole. And the reality was, it turned out he was not a citizen. Just some arcane law from who knows where But as Senator Flores mentioned, that's in the state law. So we couldn't appoint him. And so rather than just say, oh, that's the way it goes, as Senator Flores said, sometimes there are unintended consequences or a meaningful law at some point really has no meaning anymore. And so I raised it with Senator Flores, and he said, yes, I'll bring that forward. So that's why we're here today. It's the simplest bill you're ever going to see. It just strikes out a word. It's going to make the community better. As those of you know, in Las Vegas and really all around Nevada, we are a state of immigrants. We're the highest percentage of immigrants of any state. They run our businesses. They do everything we do. As he said, they serve in the military. They teach our schools. They're a critical element of all of Nevada, particularly in Southern Nevada. So allowing people like that to serve on these boards who are willing to volunteer and serve is fantastic for me. But it also it's fantastic for them because they get to see democracy. They're going to become citizens at some point. So this is a great opportunity for them to learn firsthand how democracy works. So I just cannot brag enough about Senator Flores bringing this bill. I can't urge you enough to support it and say that I don't see how anyone could oppose this, frankly. But again, I've been in the legislature, so I know how things work. But mainly I want to do is thank all of you. Senator Flores and Senator Orenshaw have most of my district. So you guys I see all the time, but it's great to see Senator Gocochea and Senator Kreisner. I mean, I knew all of you at one point or another. So it's I can say my time in the Senate was the best years of my life.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Sagerbloom, and you left a lasting mark, and I think we all try to live up to the example you set when you were here in the Assembly and the Senate.
I forgot to say one other thing. I'm coming up on 4/20, so hopefully everybody's going to be there.
We'll look forward to your visit. Members, any questions for Chair Flores or for Clark County Commissioner Sagerbloom? Senator Gocochea.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm just trying to make sure I've got this right in my mind. Now, this in counties over 100,000, presently Clark and Washoe, then this would have to happen. In counties under 100,000, if they adopted it, the commissioners adopted it by ordinance, the advisory board, then it would be in place. Is that correct?
And I'd like to actually field that to our legal counsel, Ms. Clarkson. Thank you very much, Ms. Clarkson.
Thank you. For the record, Heidi Clarkson with the Legal Division of the Legislative Council Bureau. The government structure of towns pursuant to NRS is a bit complicated. There are different types of towns depending on, first of all, the population of the county. So Senator Gocochea, you are correct. If a county has a population of 100,000 or more, they are subject to what's known as a particular set of statutes that apply to all towns in those counties. So for purposes of this bill, the sections that apply to Clark and Washoe County currently are sections 2, 3, and 4. Senator Gocochea is also correct that there are counties with a population of less than 100,000 that can, by ordinance, adopt what's known as the Uniform Town Government Law. Some counties have, I believe, and some counties have not. So if a county with a population of under 100,000 has adopted those provisions of NRS, those counties are also subject to sections 2 and 3. Section 1 of the bill is in relation to counties of a population under 100,000 that have not adopted those provisions. In those counties, there is an option for the Board of County Commissioners to establish what's called a Citizens Advisory Council. Both a Citizens Advisory Council in those rural counties and then the other counties have an advisory type board. So that's why the draft or the bill is drafted to apply to sort of all of the counties, but depending on the population of the county and perhaps what the Board of County Commissioners has adopted depends or is dependent on which sections of the bill apply. Sorry for that complicated explanation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clarkson. Senator Gocochea, any follow-up?
No, I think I understand it. I just want to make sure I was clear on it. And I would think a Board of County Commissioners in a county under 100,000, and even if they did have an advisory board, that was actually doing a smaller, I'm going to call it town. Okay. But again, that board serves at the pleasure of the Board of County Commissioners, and therefore they can in fact do away with the board, correct? The advisory board. Again, they're selected by the board. They could be removed by the board.
Ms. Clarkson.
So for the Town Advisory Council, Section 1, that is not mandatory. That is dependent on whether it's been adopted by ordinance to create the Citizens Advisory Council. It is an advisory council, though, so regardless of whether it's created or not created, it acts, if it is created, it acts solely in an advisory capacity to the Board of County Commissioners. For the other urban counties and the other rural counties to which Sections 2 and 3 apply, yes, it would. The Board of County Commissioners would create these advisory, with the Town Advisory Board. The Board of County Commissioners can determine whether that Town Advisory Board is elected or appointed.
I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clarkson. Thank you, Senator Gocochea. Any additional questions, members? Senator Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the legal explanation that answered some of my questions. Do you have any idea how many are appointed versus elected on that? I know that's part of the existing law, but some of them are appointed apparently, and then others are elected. And does the county commission or whoever, how does that get determined on whether they're appointed or elected? And I don't know how many are which.
Thank you for that question, Senator Daly. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record, and I know our staff was very helpful in helping identify exactly what boards and citizens councils we thought this would capture. In our understanding, and I also tried sending out an email to the committee members, but my understanding is it captures 50 of them. Correct.
Thank you, Chair Flores. Members, any additional questions either for the chair or Commissioner Sagerbloom? Thank you. Not seeing any additional questions. I'd like to go to support for Senate Bill 262. I'll start here in Carson City. If there's anyone who wishes to speak in support, and then I'll move down to the Sawyer Building. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Hello, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Carla Sanchez. I am a youth organizer with Make the Road Nevada. I'm testifying on behalf of myself and 14 other members of Make the Road that were planning to testify today in person, but unfortunately had to be on their way back to Vegas. I am here to express my support for SB 262. I believe all Nevadans should have the opportunity to participate in advisory boards such as the Commission on School Funding, as it's something that affects our youth directly. Classroom materials like books and after-school programs should be decided by members of the community, regardless of their immigration status. I urge the committee to support SB 262. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Anyone else in support of Senate Bill 262 here at Carson City?
Thank you so much. My name is, for the record, my name is Eric Jeng, ERICJENG. I'm the Acting Executive Director for One API in Nevada. We're here to advocate for more civic participation for the growing Asian and Pacific Islander communities. Just ditto and support this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I'd like to now go down to the Sawyer Building. Thank you for your patience. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good evening. My name is Andres Rodriguez. That's ANDRES-ROD-RIGUEZ. I'm 28 years old. I was born in Spain, and I am half Spaniard and half Ecuadorian. I'm a PhD student in public affairs at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I'm currently on an F1 student visa. I got my bachelor's degree in economics and in communication from the University of California, Davis, a master's in business administration, and a master's in management information systems from UNLV. Now, I'm on my third year of PhD in public affairs at UNLV. I firmly believe that the United States is the greatest country in the world. That's why I came here. I have always wanted to be involved in politics because I want to help change the things that are wrong and help keep the things that are right. Additionally, I have received a lot of help in my life, and I want to give back so people in Nevada can have the same or better opportunities like the ones that I've had. This is why my studies were oriented towards public affairs, and I'm getting involved as much as I can in day-to-day politics. I will be a citizen of this nation someday, and I would like a head start with Bill SB 262. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Rodriguez, and congratulations on your upcoming doctorate. Anyone else at the Sawyer Building? I'm not seeing anyone else. Broadcasting, if we could go to the phone lines for testimony in support of Senate Bill 262.
If you would like to testify in support of SB 262, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Deanna Hua-Tran. That's DEANNA, space HUA, space TRAN. I'm the Coalition Coordinator for the Nevada Immigrant Coalition. Here on behalf of the Nevada Immigrant Coalition in support of SB 262. We believe that residents should be allowed to serve on these boards because regardless of their status or background, they are still important members of our community who have a vested interest in the well-being of their neighborhoods. Allowing residents to serve on these boards also promotes community engagement and leads to more diverse and representative leadership in all of our communities. Furthermore, residents who are passionate about improving their communities should not be denied the opportunity to do so simply because of their background or status, and we hope for the committee to support this bill to continue strengthening all of our immigrant, refugee, and asylee communities. Thank you.
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now go to opposition. I'd like to start here in Carson City. Anyone who's opposed to Senate Bill 262 and wants to be heard on the record. Good evening. Please state your name for the record and proceed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and hello, Senator Segerblum. It was wonderful to work with you on rescinding all previous Article 5 constitutional conventions, and I'll never forget that wonderful experience. Thank you. I'm the state, my name is Janine Hansen, and I'm the state chairman of the Independent American Party. I looked up today the definition of a qualified elector in the Nevada Constitution, and the senator previously covered that well. We are opposed to this bill because it opens the door to non-citizens representing American citizens. As some of them, we have just learned, may even be elected. This would set a dangerous precedent to have non-citizens serving on town boards, and as we have heard the testimony, they would like to expand it to many other boards. They are still able to hear. All boards are able to hear from those who are not citizens, just like you in this legislature do, and has happened so much recently. So we oppose this as a dangerous precedent, and we appreciate the sentiment, but we are opposed to this bill. Thank you.
Thanks for your testimony, Ms. Hansen. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon. Joy Trushinsky, Trushenski, for the record. First, I want everybody to know I support legal immigration, but I do not support people coming across our open borders in mass and are not vetted. And this is, to me, is a...
Ms. Trushenski, please, if you could speak to the bill.
Okay, all right. It's coming. I do not support SB 262 as it removes the qualifications to be an American citizen and qualified elector in order to serve on an unincorporated town board or citizens advisory board for an unincorporated town. The Nevada Constitution defines that a qualified elector is a citizen qualified to vote so that they cannot have committed a felony and must be born in the United States or are a naturalized citizen having gone through the nationalization process. Those who have violated our immigration laws have committed a misdemeanor and can be imprisoned for 6 months. First offense. Illegal aliens should not even be in our country, let alone hold offices, which could affect many of our citizens. SB 262 changes that. In rural counties and in Clark and Washoe, it provides that the county commission can appoint 3 to 5 members who are residents of the unincorporated town who are not qualified electors. In other words, they can be non-citizens, illegal aliens, or felons. They should not be allowed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Truszczynski. Not seeing anyone else here in Carson City. I don't see anyone else down at the Sawyer Building, so I'd like to ask Broadcasting to go to the phone lines. Testimony in opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition to SB 262, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Government Affairs Committee. My name is Jim DeGraffenreid, DeGraffenreid, for the record. I am Nevada's Republican National Committeeman, and we are testifying in opposition to SB 262 on behalf of the Nevada Republican Party. This may be one of the craziest bills we've testified against in this or any other session. The very concept of enabling non-citizens to serve on bodies called Citizens Advisory Board is nonsensical on its face. Our platform is very clear on the subject of immigration. We welcome people from all nations, races, and cultures who enter our country legally and support the Constitution of the United States of America and our rule of law. Part of our solid support of legal immigrants, those who follow the rules, is making sure that their hard work and effort is not cheapened by giving the same benefits and advantages to those who chose to not make the same effort. SB 262 is a slap in the face to legal immigrants who could well find themselves subject to policies proposed by those who are not citizens. If citizenship confers no benefit, why would anyone do it right? It makes no sense to give individuals who aren't even eligible to vote in an election the ability to serve on a town advisory board. To do so is a first step to having non-citizen council members or more. If I moved to a foreign country, any foreign country, and attempted to become an elected or appointed government official, or to even vote for any elected officials, I'd quickly be shown the door. It wouldn't be acceptable there, and it's absolutely not acceptable here. Opposing SB 262 is just plain Nevada common sense. I hope the committee and legislators will do so. Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Chair and Committee. This is Lynn Chapman, and I'm with Nevada Families for Freedom on this state Vice President. I just was wondering if a board has 5 people on it and 3 are not citizens, that means the 3 will make the decisions for the citizens of that town. Could I serve on boards and advisory boards in a foreign country? I doubt it. Tribal lands are a sovereign nation. Could I serve on their boards? I don't think so. Anyone can go to the meetings, like a county commission meeting, a city council meeting, and they can speak about anything during their public input. I was speaking with a friend today, and she is studying to become a citizen. She's a legal resident, and she's studying hard. And when I told her about this bill, she was really incensed. She said, you know, I'm working really hard to become a citizen so that I can partake more in the government. And she says for her, it was really an unfair thing to have people that aren't citizens sitting on boards, and she thinks that they should do what she's doing, become a citizen or not serve on the boards. I did speak with other people, and they were also angry about this, and they are not in favor of this bill at all. So thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Public line is open and working, and there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. I'd like to now go to neutral testimony on Senate Bill 262 here in Carson City. If there's anyone who wishes to be heard in the neutral position. Okay, not seeing anyone. down at the Sawyer Building. I don't see anyone down there, but if there's anyone who wishes to be heard in the neutral position, now's your chance. All right, broadcasting, if we could go to the phone lines. Anyone who wishes to be heard in the neutral position on SB 262.
If you would like to testify in neutral for SB 262, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much, broadcasting. Chair Flores, Commissioner Sagerbloom, any closing comments you'd like to make? We appreciate the presentation of Senate Bill 262 today.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. I just wanted to use Andres as a perfect example of why something like this is so important. Andres, not only is he academically very well prepared, but I am confident that one day he's going to be serving this very body. I think he's going to run for office and he's going to win. I make that point because he's a perfect scenario of an individual that if we can start getting him engaged now, participating in boards, providing his expertise, his intellect, everything he brings to the table now, we're doing a service to him so that when he becomes a citizen, he can run for office. And we're also doing a service to us in that we're allowing ourselves to have such a brilliant young man participate and help in very important decision-making and conversations that we engage in some of these boards. And I want to once more remind everybody, in this country, there are non-U.S. citizens who proudly wear the U.S. badge and flag and have died honorably for this country. And those human beings were good enough for us. And we will all get up and salute them and say thank you. It is not something new to talk about whether or not non-U.S. citizens are enough. We've made it abundantly clear many times that we are indebted to a lot of these brilliant human beings. So I am only making that point to just remind folk that in a lot of other areas, non-citizens are now contributing a lot to this country and making it better. And I also want to just once again remind folk that legal permanent residents who are doing everything right will be able to sit on these boards. So nobody's talking about undocumented versus documented. We're talking about individuals who are likely have deep roots. Who would want to sit on a board? It's somebody who has deep roots in their community. It's somebody that's been engaged by a elected official or members of the community. It's not just random human beings that are participating. And again, I want to remind folk that unfortunately there's a bunch of people who don't want to participate and be involved on boards. So if there's a member of our community who owns a home here, who's working hard, who's been here for a very long time, and is on the pathway to eventually become a citizen, why not allow them to participate now in the process? And with that, I'd like to hand it over. I don't know if our commissioner has any other remarks that he'd like to add.
Thank you very much for your comments, Chair Flores. Commissioner Sagerbloom?
Just briefly, first, thank you so much for allowing me to participate. And I forgot to mention Senator Daley. Great to see him. But as Senator Flores said, these people are part of the community and they're appointed by the commission. So they're selected. We review their background. Their vote is not binding on anything. But if there's a large population that owns homes in these neighborhoods, representatives of that population should be allowed to participate and give me advice as to what they think should happen in their neighborhood. That's what we're talking about. So I just urge you to support this bill and allow people of all backgrounds to protect their neighborhoods. And as you know, Senator Orenshaw, this is your neighborhood too. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sagerbloom, Chair Flores, for presenting this important legislation. With that, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 262 and hand the gavel back to our chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for your help. Next, we'd like to open it up for public comment. Anyone in Carson City or Las Vegas hoping to join us for public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to the phones. BPS, anybody wishing to join us for public comment?
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you, members. I appreciate the hard work, but more importantly, thank you to our staff. I know you're working extra hours, so very appreciative of the long days. Unfortunately, this is going to be the norm for the next couple of weeks. I say that only so that you let your families know that it's my fault that you're staying out a little later than you wanted to. We will see everybody back here on Friday. This meeting's adjourned.